Alrighty, the whole setup is that the four aspects, Alexstrasza, Ysera, Nosdormu and Kalik, come together at Wyrmrest Temple as they always do. However, since they fulfill their destiny, the older aspects don't see the point anymore.
For the dawning of the Age of Mortals has begun.
Kalik, who only recently received his aspect powers, wants the group to stay together, but he fails to convince the others. They plan to split up the Wyrmrest Accord with the next meeting. Kalik flies over the bones of Galakrond, father of all dragons, and inside the bones he finds a strange artifact. This artifact unwillingly drags him into the mind of past Malygos. This has some nasty side effects on him, since the relic is not working as it should. Being so close to the corpse of Galakrond has corrupted the device. It takes control over Kalik, forces him to transform between dragon and human, and it makes him fly around the world without him even knowing. Eventually, Jaina finds out about Kalik's predicament and she tries to find a way of saving him. As I said, Kalik enters past Malygos' mind, and with past Malygos, I mean Malygos before the aspects receive their powers. Malygos, the Proto-Drake. In this time, the Proto-Drakes are still very primal. Most can't think beyond eat, sleep and reproduce, but some are starting to evolve to a higher level. The future 5 aspects, Malygos, Alexstrasza, Ysera, Nosdormu and Neltharion, are of course amongst those Proto-Drakes already evolved. The problem that they're facing is in this time Galakrond all of a sudden is starting to hunt Proto-Drakes and is starting to hunt in their area. Galakrond is not a dragon, instead he's a mutated Proto-Drake. What happened was that he became so big that the food in his area couldn't sustain him anymore. To survive, he started to eat his own kind, and that, even amongst these primal Proto-Drakes, was simply not done. This also had a weird side effect on him. On one part is that he pukes out his victims, and these victims become zombie drakes. They hunger for the flesh of their own kind, they have an attack, a breath attack that melts away flesh, and they can bite others to transport the disease, turning those into zombies. Another effect was that it transformed Galakrond even more, made him even bigger and even more hungry. Eventually he would become so hungry that he would start to eat the zombie drakes. Yes, the drakes that he already had devoured, he puked those out, they become zombie drakes, and then he would devour them once again because he was just so hungry. Thankfully, the second time that he puked them out, they wouldn't come back to life. Anyways, besides that disgusting little fact, he became a threat to the Proto-Drakes, so something had to be done. The first fight was Galakrond versus the United Proto-Drakes, and this was unique for that time. As I said, they were still very primal, but one Proto-Drake managed to get them to work together. The first attack failed of course, but thankfully the future aspects survived. The second fight was Galakrond versus Tyr and the future aspects. For those that missed out on my Titans and Old God video, Tyr was one of the keepers of Ulduar. He was not a Titan, but a Titan keeper. It is rumored that Tyr was the one who led the first humans who descended from the Vrykul away from Northrend and into the rest of the world. The location Tyr's hand, for example, is named after Tyr. This is all just speculation though, so let's focus on the facts. In the story, Tyr uses the artifact that Kalik found, and he uses it to make a copy of the memories of the aspects. He then comes up with a plan to fight Galakrond together with the aspects, but they fail. Tyr's hand gets bitten off and both his hand and the artifact go inside the stomach of Galakrond. Round 3 was Galakrond versus the future aspects. Although Tyr had a very nice plan, it revolved around using his strengths instead of those of the future aspects. They get together and they come up with a plan that requires teamwork and makes the most use out of their individual strengths. Neltharion was physically very strong, Alexstrasza was born to be a leader, Malygos was already very smart, Nosdormu was punctual and had a great sense of timing, and Ysera was able to dream of things others would write off as impossible. They fight Galakrond, and with the use of their teamwork, they save the day. After that, Tyr and the other keepers asked them if they want to become guardians of the world in case something like Galakrond would ever happen again. This part was the whole reason why I was so interested in the story, but it's described very vaguely. I'll read a bit out of the book. Near them, 2 more hooded figures materialized, and that's the Titan keepers. The newcomers raised their hands. He also suddenly sensed that there was another greater presence acting through the keepers. That presence being the true force bringing about the Proto-Dragon's coming transformations, the Titans. It is happening, the Blue Dragon thought. The Titans are the ones overseeing the transformation, the creation of the aspects. As they raised their hands, the figures also changed. They began to grow. Their hoods and cloaks fell away, revealing 4 giants akin in appearance to Tyr when he had fought Galakrond. The keepers continued to swell in size and their bodies glowed with tremendous power. And that's where it ends. That's the complete description of how the dragons received their powers. I was so disappointed that this was all that we got. So Kalik was just seeing this as he was in the mind of Malygos, and Jaina was trying to get him out of there, but he was torn apart between seeing this moment and following Jaina. And unfortunately, he chooses to follow Jaina instead of actually witnessing how they receive their powers, so yeah, it was kinda disappointing. Jaina saves the day, but she did not do it alone. As she is searching for an answer, she goes to the same place as Caleb went, and there she sees a vision of a Tonka who gives her the key to fixing the artifact. Caleb also saw this vision as he found the item, so it's heavily suggested that this vision is actually Tyr trying to help them. Throughout the story they also see glimmers of a hooded figure, which once again implies that Tyr is out there, somewhere. Like I said, Jaina manages to save Kalec and he decides to use the artifact as Tyr intended for it to be used. He brings the aspects together and he shows them the visions of their past. Tyr suspected that there would come a day where they would need a reminder of who they truly were before they became aspects. Even though they used up all of their aspect powers, they were already something before they got those powers, so they can be something again. It's just a matter of finding a new place in this world, and they decide not to disband the Wormrest Accord. And there you go, that's the short version of the story. Now there are a couple of lore things that I would like to summarize, just to make it clear. Galagrond is not the father of all dragons. The Titans are the ones who transform proto-drakes into dragons. They let this myth exist to avoid having to explain about how he ate all of his fellow drakes and just avoid that nasty history. To the question what will happen with the aspects, they used all of their aspect powers to defeat Deathwing, so there's no longer a Keeper of Time or a Guardian of the Dream. That's gone, and they're also mortal. We don't know exactly how old they can get because no dragon has ever died of old age yet. That doesn't make them powerless though. They had qualities and powers even before they became aspects, so they at least have that. They will always have a certain connection to the aspect, like Alexstrasza will always treasure life, and Kalec will always be drawn to magic. That's just something that's part of them. What will their role be in this world? Who knows, but you can be sure that when Blizzard needs them, they'll be part of a story again. The battle with Galagrond is where Tyr lost his hand, and it's suggested that Tyr is still somewhere out there. It's not explained why he abandoned his Watcher's Tower or why he escaped the corruption of Loken, but I think that the theory of him guiding the early humans might not be so crazy. As I've told you guys before, Neltharion fell victim to the whispers of the old gods because he was the aspect of Earth. He had a connection to the places where the old gods were locked up. However, in this story it becomes clear that Neltharion already heard the whispers of the old gods even before he received his powers. There's a small one line that explains this in the book. As the Titans ask the aspects if they want to become guardians, Neltharion stares off into the distance as if he's listening to something that isn't there. It doesn't mean that his powers didn't push him over the edge, but it was nice to see that they were already working his mind. Out of all of this, we can be sure that the Titan Keepers have the ability of communicating with the Titans, since they summon the Titans to grant the powers. This does create some questions in my mind, as in, why didn't they call the help for the Titans before? Why didn't they tell the Titans about Deathwing, for example, as he attacked Wyrmrest Temple? Or why didn't Raden contact them when they fell silent? We could speculate on answers, of course, like maybe the Titans are testing us, maybe they're training us, or maybe something entirely different happened.
Oh! We have fallen.
We're gonna start off with the one that's probably caused the most trouble amongst all of the flights. We're starting with the Black Dragonflights.
At last, the whole of Azeroth will break.
Their aspect Neltharion was empowered by Keeper Tyr and the Titans after the, at the time, Proto-Dragons banded together to end the threat of Galagrond. His personal blessing, it came from Kaskarov, the Shaper and Forger of Worlds. My blessing upon you will see humble compared to those which have been bestowed upon the others. The managing of time, of life, of dreams and magic. I offer you the earth, the soil, the ground, the deep places. But know that the earth is the basis of all things. It is where we are rooted, where you must come from if you are to go to. Here is whence true strength comes, from deep places, from within the world, and within oneself. Just one small problem. The earth upon Azeroth, it houses the threat of the old gods. Their whispers, they came to Neltharion even before he was made an aspect, and his connection to the earth, it made their voices all the stronger. Their corruption seeped into his mind, into his heart and into his body, spread throughout the entirety of his flight. Under their guidance, Neltharion would eventually become known under the name that most of you know him as. He will become Deathwing.
And all will burn beneath the shadow of my wings.
Deathwing's plans and the fracturing of the aspects. That started with the creation of a powerful device, which was known as the Dragon Soul. Way back when, during the War of the Ancients, over 10,000 years ago, Deathwing suggested to his fellow aspects that they should all sacrifice a portion of their power. They would combine it all into one single device, into one single attack, all for the defense of Azeroth and the defeat of the Burning Legion.
That terrible glow. Should that be?
For it to be as it must, yes.
It is a weapon like no other. It must be like no other.
They didn't know, of course, the madness that lay hidden underneath, and they wouldn't find out until it was far too late. The disc, it did what Deathwing had promised would do, but not just the demons were going to feel its might. Azeroth defenders had to flee from the battlefield as well, and then he turned onto his fellow dragons. He nearly wiped out the entire Blue Dragonflight, which sent Malagos into the pits of despair and madness. But wielding the device also had its effects on Deathwing, which forced him to retreat and put his body back together with plates. Enough damage was caused though, yet his plans and that of the old gods, they were prevented. The Legion, it was stopped at a great price, and the Dragon Soul, now known as the Demon Soul, that was hidden away on Azeroth, away from Deathwing. Powerful enchantments were placed upon it to prevent any dragons from wielding it in the future. And of course, there were powerful protections in place to keep it out of Deathwing's hands. His treachery cursed his entire flight to a life of fear and seclusion, as in the coming ages, they'd find themselves hunted to the brink of extinction by all the other flights, except for something rather miraculous. After the war, we would see Hall on High Mountain on the warpath for Deathwing, tracking him down in his vault. Inside, our Hall got his hands on the artifact, which was called the Hammer of Kaskarov. With its titanic power, Hall and his allies, they couldn't destroy Deathwing, but at least they could banish him from the lands all the way to Deepholm, elemental plane of Earth. While there, they also managed to birth an uncorrupted black dragon, Abyssian, would from then on remain a close ally to the High Mountain Tauren. As the position of High Chieftain, it passed on through Hall's line. They would always find wisdom and power from their spirit walker Ebonhorn, keeping his draconic identity a secret just between them. It was Ebonhorn that foresaw our coming during the Expansion Legion, and his assistance, it would allow us to save the High Mountain Tauren, eventually have them added to the Horde. He also met his fellow uncorrupted black dragon, Rephion. Although we might have lost Ebonhorn to the whispers of the old gods, was it not for our and Rephion's aid? There's darkness locked away within High Mountain, not to mention that an old god was released from his prison during Battle for Azeroth. We needed to empower our Heart of Azeroth with draconic power if we're gonna have any hope of taking care of N'Zoth. Again, it was Abyssian that stood at our side, doing what their aspect could not, stand up against the old gods, and guiding our way to the power of his flights.
Don't make me burn your face off.
Going back to that aspect, Deathwing wouldn't stay in Deepholm forever, but it would be a comfortable recovery spot as he planned his next moves. Although the enchantments had made it impossible for him to wield the Demon Soul himself, that didn't mean that he couldn't guide others to the treasure, have them do the dirty work for him. It was the alien orcs that had come to Azeroth through the Dark Portal that would make for his perfect servants. The Dragonmark clan was guided to the disc and instructed on how to wield it. With it, they managed to imprison the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. They enslaved her, and by extension her entire Red Flight, to the will of the orcs, turning them into tools of war, and he couldn't have done much worse to her, turning her children of life into the bringers of death. Despite their added power though, the war between the Alliance and the Hordes, it would still be lost by the orcs. That didn't mean Alexstrasza's freedom though, nor did it mean that the orcs wouldn't try a second time. The Dark Portal reopened, and this time they didn't come to conquer the world, they came for some powerful artifacts. The artifacts in turn would allow them to open up more portals to different worlds. This was seen as an opportunity to our Deathwing, a gateway to a whole new world for him to conquer. The orcs were approached with a deal. They were going to take a whole bunch of his Dragon Eggs to their world of Draenor. In exchange, they would have the knowledge and power of his flight on their side during their quest of gathering these artifacts. Deathwing was accompanied by his son Sabellion and others of their flights, while the orcs finished up the mission on Azeroth and upheld their end of the bargain. Quite a dangerous allegiance, one that didn't go unnoticed by the Alliance of Lordaeron. They weren't going to let the orcs inflict the same damage to other worlds as they had brought to Azeroth. So brave heroes stepped through the Dark Portal as well to stop the Horde once and for all. Within what we now call the Blades Mountains, Deathwing and the others, they found some heavy resistance in the form of Gruul the Dragon Killer and his children. Not to mention that Khadgar and the Alliance, they started mashing up the eggs as well. Their combined assaults, not to mention Khadgar figuring out how to use his magic to dismantle those blades holding Deathwing together, all of that pushed the Black Dragonflight back, And when ultimately the Alliance shut down the Dark Portal, Sibelian and several of their flights stayed on Draenor, while Deathwing, he abandoned his plans. He abandoned the Axe, he abandoned the planets, all of them, and returned to Azeroth. Escaping the destruction that followed, the magics of the Twisting Nether, which transformed Draenor into Outland as we know it as today. Sibelian and their crew, they kept up their fight against Gru and his children, not afraid of making friends and allies, like Rexar, or recruiting heroes while under the visage of Baron Sablemane. Anything it took to get the mission done. But besides the story that they had with the Burning Crusade, Sibelian and the others, they just kinda remained in Outlands. They haven't really been given storylines, so who knows what changes will happen to them while being away from Azeroth so long. Not to mention that by now, the world is cleansed from the old god's infection. Who knows if and when they're ever going to bring Sibelian back into the story. Who knows what he's going to be like.
Mortals. Mortals never change.
We can say for certain that those dragon eggs that were left behind, they did change quite a bit. Those magics unleashed that transformed the world, it also transformed these unhatched eggs from black dragons into the so-called Netherwing dragons. Ironically, it would be this new accidental breed of dragon that would restore Malygos's sanity. But that's a story we'll save when dealing with the blue Dragonflight. Keeping it with the black one, Sinfaria, also known as Sinestra. She had great interest in these Netherwing dragons, as we see her walk around during the Burning Crusade, pretending to be an emissary of the Black Dragonflight. In truth, Sinfaria hated Deathwing. She had been his prime consort, but mating with him after this transformation, it proved to be fatal for most, if not all of them. She was one of the few, if not the only one, that survived that horrific experience, only to be scarred for the rest of her life. Now she felt eternal, agonizing, burning pain, and she wanted to work on her plans and schemes away from that foul Deathwing and her flights. But what she didn't know was that she was actually still following his whispers, his guidance all along, following it to use the Netherwing dragons and create a brand new breed, this time the so-called Twilight Dragons.
Come forth, children of Twilight. Your mother calls!
It's within the book Night of the Dragon in which she would be defeated, only to then be resurrected by void magics for the expansion Cataclysm. Not a whole lot was left of her spirits. Now they just used her to create more and more of the Twilight Dragons, until heroes ventured into the bastion of Twilight, and they stopped her. Hopefully for good this time. That still didn't stop the spread of Twilight Dragons though, as they have shown up a couple of times. We've even seen Vexiona infused with the void.
Why do you resist, sister? Do you not see the grand destiny that awaits our kind?
Deathwing's schemes run deep, the echoes of his plans everlasting. So the mad aspects, he managed to escape Draenor before turning to Outlands, and he decided to go with a bit more manipulation. His disguise was that of the noble lord Davil Prestor. With it, he managed to infiltrate the court of Lordaeron. He became buddy-buddy with the king. He almost even married his daughter Kalia. Basically, he tried to destroy the alliance from within. It might have even worked. Was his attention not drawn to a different plan? The orcs of the Dragonmaw clan. At this point, they still held Queen Alexstrasza captive. They were forcing her to breed, produce a whole bunch of eggs and dragons for the orcs to use. Seeing how his own flights had been hunted to near extinction, and how he'd lost a whole bunch more on Draenor, Deathwing decided that it was time to take Alexstrasza's eggs, add them to his flights. Fake visions of an imminent alliance attack were sent to the orcs to get them moving out of their hiding hole of Grim Patrol. Then there was also the mage Ronin, sent out by Crassus to save his beloved queen. Another pawn that Deathwing could use to sell his little fiction. Long story short, Deathwing's plans failed. Alexstrasza was freed. The other aspects showed up to save her. Ronin managed to get his hands on the demon soul that the orcs were using. He destroyed it and returned the stolen aspect's powers. For the first time in over 10,000 years, Deathwing was forced to face his fellow aspects as equals, which was a battle that he simply could not win. Again, he was forced into hiding. But don't worry, he still has a son and daughter hard at work. Onyxia, she took a page out of his book and disguised herself as the noble lady Katrana Prestor. She infiltrated Stormwind and the House of Nobles, manipulated events so that the Stonemasons Guild, it was not properly paid for their work of rebuilding Stormwind. Riots were led through the streets by Edwin Van Cleef, and one single rock took the life of Queen Tiffin Ryn. This left Anduin Ryn without a mother, and Varian Ryn without a wife. The depression that followed, it left him vulnerable to her controlling magics, but the love for his son, it kept him grounded. Time for a different approach. By using the newly formed Defiance Brotherhood, led by Ed Van Cleef, she had Varian kidnapped and then used her magics to split the king into two. One would be his strong-willed side. That side she would dispose of, while leaving his weak-willed side alive. A side that was easy to manipulate and rule from behind the curtains. Unfortunately, her spellwork was interrupted by the Naga, which gave the strong-willed Varian a chance to escape. He would later return after earning himself some new friends, a gladiator victory and the nickname Logash. Her treachery was exposed for all of Stormwind to see. A beautiful classic questline, which most of you probably experienced by now if you ever tuned yourself to Onyxia's lair. That's where she kidnapped young Anduin Rintu. So the two parts of the king and their friends, they formed a raiding party and they went after her. Many whelps and more dots later, she was kind enough to blast the two variants during the fight with magics, which also put them back together.
It seems you need another lesson, mortals.
In the end, she lost her head, quite literally, and displayed for all to see within Stormwind. Then there was her brother, Nefarian, who took on the visage of Lord Victor Nefarius. While he did dabble with the humans, infiltrated a little bit of high society, he spent most of his time with the orcs within Blackrock Mountain. They worked on his own plans and experiments to rebuild their Black Dragonflight. In time, managing to combine the powers of all the different flights into one, the so-called chromatic dragonflights. Not all of his experiments were successful though, but those that were proved to be extremely powerful. Horde heroes caught wind of what this Black Dragon and his so-called Dark Horde were up to. Into the mountains they went, slaying any and all that dared to stand in their way.
Your ally here attempted to match his power against mine, and paid the price.
Even poor Vilastras, a red dragon that had come to stop Nefarian, but was instead corrupted. They had to be put down. And like his sister before him, Nefarian lost his head, put on display for the world to see our victory over the dragons. But all of that would have been the end of either siblings. Like the mother Sinfaria, Nefarian was also brought back with void magics. His dad was kind enough to pick up the head of his sister from Stormwind, and within the Blackwing Descent, they tried to bring her back. Not the only new experiment that was being performed there. Together with the former human Maloriak, Nefarian had once again created some incredibly powerful foes to take out. And take them out we did, despite Nefarian being really mean to us.
Allow me to grant you a title befitting the amazing achievement you just performed.
As you might understand by now, these dragons don't like to stay dead. In the case of Onyxian and Nefarian, their rest was disturbed during Battle for Azeroth, where the old god N'Zoth and his minions they wanted to bring back for yet another round. Our Rephion wasn't going to let that happen though, stopping their efforts and using the last remaining skills to make us a cloak, which actually protected us from N'Zoth's corruption, and ultimately, it allowed us to take him out. Speaking of Rephion and N'Zoth, let's rewind a little bit and go back to the Cataclysm time periods. This expansion, it was the culmination of all that the old god had been working towards. They were going to bring about the Hour of Twilight, the moment in which they would be set free from the prison and rule Azeroth once more. The madness with Deathwing, it intensified, burning like it had never done before. Random territories across the world, they were put ablaze, and the elements themselves were pushed into a frenzy. They were allied with Cho'Gall, the Twilight Hammer, Ragnaros, Alakir, Druids of the Flame. Everything, basically, that they had was thrown at the world, and the world united behind Thrall and the other aspects to stop Deathwing and his schemes. They also allied with the Red Dragonflight in making something rather unique. Or at least, it was at the time, as we had no idea that Ebonhorn already existed. We were going to make the first uncorrupted Black Dragon within millennia. Some lines were crossed to make it so, as the Red Dragon Riastraza, she captured the Black Dragon Nixandra, forced her to lay eggs for their experiments. We then combined one of her eggs with wild Black Dragon eggs, black whelpling corpses, and a strange ancient titanic device. Seeing how the dragons were created by the Titans, they figured that this ancient relic, it might do the trick. And they were right. That strange mixing pot, it resulted in exactly what we wanted, a purified black dragon egg, for which our Rephion, after keeping it away from Deathwing, he would hatch. What the Reds didn't plan on was that Rephion wasn't exactly happy with what they'd done, and he had no intention of following their lead or being controlled.
And Farad?
Yes, sir.
Break his legs.
And while he might not be the best team player, he did become exactly what we wanted. He was a true black dragon, one upholding the charge of keeping Azeroth safe. First task on the agenda, that was taking care of those among his own flight that were listening to the whispers of the old gods. He doesn't know about Sibelian on Outlands, but he is able to track down targets in Gilneas, or those closest to him, or even his own father. Let's not forget that pretty much anything Deathwing has done so far, it's been try and bring his old gods masters back, free from their prisons, to rule the world once more.
The hour of twilight is nigh. The sun sets on your pitiful, mortal existence.
And during the world-transforming cataclysm, we saw all that the mad aspect had to bear. His son's experiments to create a chromatic dragonflight, they were pushed forward in the book Twilight of the Aspects. A massive 5-headed dragon called Chromatus. It would have been a major threat to the world had they not taken care of it in the book. It was so powerful that they couldn't just destroy it. Instead, it had to be locked away within an arcane prison, guarded by the different flights, just waiting for the day for someone to give it the spark of life. That's where it remains even now. A rumor has it that Chromatus was actually intended to be a boss within the Dragon Soul raids, but has then been replaced by Altraxion. The monstrous Twilight Dragon is introduced by Deathwing as the culmination of all their efforts. But not even Altraxion was able to stop us. Stop the heroes of the world who had gone above and beyond, through time itself, to save Azeroth and prevent the Hour of Twilight. With the original Dragon Soul taken from the past and re-empowered, they stood shoulder to shoulder with Thrall and the Aspects. Meanwhile, the mad Deathwing was empowered by N'Zoth beyond anything he had been granted before. Even so, it wouldn't be enough. By sacrificing a huge chunk of their powers, the Aspects were able to fulfill their purpose and bring about the dawn of the Age of Mortals. Deathwing's defeat and the Aspects' sacrifice, it would ripple through the flights, who now found themselves working together with the mortals to keep the domains going. Rephion, of course, had no problem accepting their aid. In fact, he made quite a lot of use of it. He offered legendary rewards for any heroes that were willing to follow his plans. Plans that took us into Pandaria, where Rephion became rather close with Prince Anduin Rin, while also preparing the world for what he had seen. He had seen the coming of the Burning Legion, and he was prepared to do anything it took to prepare the world. As in his mind, a world divided would not have a chance against it. So he wanted that one faction took over from the other. He wanted the Alliance, after uniting against War Chief Garrosh Hellscream, to dismantle the Horde and take them over into one unified front. But instead, Vol'jin is appointed as War Chief, and Varian steps away.
Hi, king indeed. Why did he allow another war chief? He could have united the world under the Alliance banner. What a fool I was to trust his ambition. Should have taken over the throne room myself, like Auntie Onyxia. Get things done!
There's actually a bit of a lore problem here when it comes to Rephion's proclamation that Onyxia is his auntie and that Deathwing is his father, although they have tried to clear it up. So we know that while Rephion's creation is a bit different compared to the rest of his kind, his mother would be Nyxandra. We know from Sinestra that mating with Deathwing is an excruciating experience that leaves its scars, if not just outright kills you. So looking at Nyxandra, how can it be that she is still alive and completely unharmed? To that, there was no answer given. But to try and explain how he calls Onyxia his auntie, they've made Nyxandria Onyxia's sister, so another child of Deathwing. Which has, its own implications when it comes to dragon mating. That still doesn't answer how she survived the mating though, and to that they had to concede. Deathwing isn't technically Rephion's direct biological father. Now before we turn this into the Mori show, personally I'd say that Rephion, he has no direct bloodline to Deathwing, but in a general sense, Deathwing would be the daddy of all the black dragons. Calling Onyxia his auntie, that could be seen similar to how Anduin calls Jaina his auntie. Not to mention that calling yourself the prince of the Black Dragonflight, especially when you believe that most of your flight has been wiped out, it just adds a bit of flair, it adds a bit of a title, but that's my personal take. I would love for Blizzard to clarify. Either way, his plans of uniting the world by having one faction take over the other, they blew up in his face. His new plan was to work together with the bronze dragon Kairos Dormu. They were going to use adventurers to bring them the power needed to liberate Garrosh Hellscream from his trial, send them over to a brand new reality. There you could form a brand new horde, bring that one over into our reality, have it stand with us against the coming legion. Unfortunately, Garrosh had no intention of playing along with this, of being used by the dragons. Make no mistake, he was going to form his horde, but not in the defense of our Azeroth, rather to conquer it. The Dark Portal turned red, and Azeroth united against his threats. Once more, they stepped through the Dark Portal into this alternate Draenor. And while there were books talking about Rephion being on the planet as well, some observant players, they even saw him once or twice. He played no major role in the expansion that he started. And ironically, trying to protect the world from the coming of the Legion, it actually made it happen. From alternate Draenor, there came alternate Gul'dan, who sent over into our realm to kick off the next and biggest invasion from the Burning Legion. Varian Rin and Sylvanas Windrunner led the charge onto the Broken Shore, and it was upon these shores where Varian would sacrifice himself to give the Alliance the chance to retreat. The manipulations of a black dragon, it once upon a time meant the death of his mother, and now, once again, it meant the demise of one of Anduin's parents, and the Boy King would not forget.
Rathian. Anduin, it's been so long.
Oh, dragons.
I suppose I deserved that.
Oh, you deserve more than that. My father is dead because of you!
And my father is dead because of the old gods.
Lad, he's come to help us.
Despite doing everything that he could to defend the world from the Legion, Rephion didn't really play a part in that final battle. That's okay though, plenty of other things to protect the world from, like the old god N'Zoth, that finally managed to escape his prison during Battle for Azeroth. In his time away, Rephion is not sat idle. His personal Black Talon agent forces, they've been expanded. He's been searching for the Dragon Isles, but also searching for ways to counter the old god's corruption. This research has led him into places like Dire Maul or the Lore Walkers in Pandaria, but he also went to Karazhan, where he had some chats with the Shade of Medivh. I can never change the actions of my past, he told him, but I can forge a new legacy to leave behind. That wisdom stuck with our young prince, whose research not only saved his brother Ebonhorn, it also equipped us to stand against the corruption of N'Zoth. With Rephion on our side, we ventured into Ny'alotha itself, cut our way through the heart of corruption, and for the first time in a very, very long time, the world of Azeroth is being cleansed of its old god's infection. Poetic, how his father fell victim to them and caused so much destruction, where in the end, our prince, he would make things right and do what not even the Titans were able to do.
Every action. The old gods have been vanquished, yet they were only one threat to Azeroth. Many others still loom on the horizon and lurk in the shadows. Know that from this day forth, the Black Dragonflight will honor its ancient charge and stand in defense of our world, along with its champions.
And that's pretty much the major story of the Black Dragonflight. A corrupted flight with a dark legacy, but perhaps the future can be brighter. Rephion, Ebonhorn, and perhaps even Sibelian, the future of the flight is now in their hands. Time will tell what that future is going to be. Why not move on to the one that was once upon a time considered to be his best friend? We're gonna be talking about Malygos and his Blue Dragonflight.
I am the essence of magic!
Malygos was empowered by Keeper Tyr and the Titans, after the, at the time, Proto-Dragons banded together to end the threat of Galakrond. His blessing came from Norgannon, keeper of celestial magics and lore. I believe that you will find that my gift to you is not just a profound duty, which it is, but also a delight, which it is. Magic must be regulated, managed and controlled, but it must also be appreciated and valued and not hoarded. Such is the contradiction you must deal with. May you be dutiful and joyous both. The intelligent and good-humored Malygos loved performing his duty, loved sharing the magic and wonders with the world. His domain was just as wondrous as he could ever wish it, filled with brightness and colors and young. Jokingly, they wondered if the Titans shouldn't have made him the aspect of life, and his bond with Neltharion, it was so tight that they may not have been brothers in blood, they were truly brothers in nature. Perhaps it was that bond that blinded him to the madness that took hold of her Deathwing. When he suggested that they should pool the power together into the Dragon Soul, Malygos insisted to be the first to sacrifice a bit of himself. It was his way of championing his friend's cause.
It is done. All have given that which must be given. I now seal the Dragon Soul forever.
That terrible glow. Should that be?
For it to be as it must, yes.
It is a weapon like no other. It must be like no other.
And when the madness came to the surface, when Deathwing used the Dragon Soul not just against the Burning Legion, but also the defenders of Azeroth and his fellow dragons, Malygos felt all the more responsible. Him and his blue flight surrounded his old friends, tried to reason with him, but when that failed, they attacked, planning to erase the disc from existence. But he was weakened. A portion of his power was locked within the soul, while Neltharion was operating at full strength. Even before the white arc vanished, he held forth the demon soul. Instead of the golden light that had decimated so much of the land below, a grey one shot forth in every direction. Malygos created a shield of smoke, but plain smoke it might as well have been. The grey light caught him, threw him back hard. He sailed over the hills, over the horizon, roaring in agony all the way. His prime consort Sindragosa was also hurled away, all the way to the frozen north, where blinded and near death, she instinctively tried to reach Dragonblight, the ancestral dragon graveyards. Her life continued to fade away as her sanity deteriorated. In the midst of her delirium, Sindragosa's final thoughts turned to bitterness and hatred. Hatred against the Burning Legion, against Neltharion, even against her beloved Malygos, but most of all, hatred against the world of mortals.
Suffer, mortals, as your pathetic magic betrays you!
And in her dying moments, Sindragosa vowed revenge. A few millennia later, and she was brought back in on death by the Lich King as Queen of the Frostbrood. Heroes would defeat her, take what remained of her spirits, and bring her back to Caligos at Wormrest Temple, finally letting her spirit rest. For the rest of Malygos' consort and followers, the fate that Neltharion had in mind was much more horrific. As one, the dragon shriveled. They deflated like draining water sacks. Their cries were terrible to behold. Though they struggled, none could escape the grasping grey illumination. The other dragons sought to come to the rescue, but it was already too late. Reduced to dry husks, their magic and their life force drained by the demon soul, the dying blue dragons faded at last to dust that scattered in the winds. This critical moment would change Malygos and his flight forever. Gone was the merry, humorous giant. With his flight virtually decimated, the Spellweaver would begin to slip into his own madness, as his kind became all but extinct. Deathwing would be defeated, and the Burning Legion's invasion, it failed at a great price. The world, it kept on turning, but now without its aspect of magic. He hid away within his lair of the Nexus, and we can only guess what life on Azeroth would have been like if Malygos would have taken a more active role. Would he have taken action against Illidan, creating a new Well of Eternity? Would he have managed to prevent the Guardian from becoming corrupted? With the magics that opened the Dark Portal, would it have pushed him and his flight into action? Was he not driven mad with grief? We may never know. But what we do know is that thousands of years later, Deathwing's plans, they led to the enslavement of Alexstrasza to the Orcs, and her consort Coriostras desperately wanted to save his beloved. He asked the other aspects to help him with this, but decided to stand up against Deathwing and his creation. That took quite a lot out of them. They were still weakened after all, their powers locked away within the disc. Even so, they made the call to stand with Coriostras and others. Others, like the mage Ronin, who managed to destroy the demon soul, restore the Aspect's powers, and now, our Deathwing, he had to face his fellow Aspects as equals, a fight that he wasn't going to win, so again, he had to retreat. While having his full powers back was great and all, that didn't immediately mean that his sanity was restored. That damage that was caused by Deathwing, it would also accidentally be fixed by Deathwing. An earlier plan of his, it saw him work together with the Orcs to bring some of his Dragon Eggs to the, at the time, Draenor, which would later be transformed to the Outlands. During that magical transformation, the powers of the Twisting Nether, it blasted across his surface, transforming those Dragon Eggs from black ones into the Netherwing Dragons. Powerful beings, yet extremely childish. They had no true leader, which made them susceptible to outside influences, which were ready to abuse them. Not everyone looked upon them with evil intent though. We also saw the blue dragon Tyragosa, who was betrothed to Caligos, but as the events with Envina played out within the comics, that betrothal and that love, it took a backseat. Instead, she grew closer with the human Yorub Mace, and once all was said and done with the events of the Sunwell, she would find herself drawn to Outlands to investigate the magics that she was sensing, coming into contact with these Netherwing dragons, and she cared deeply for them. She was concerned that more pain and suffering would be inflicted upon them, that they would not survive here in Outlands, so she decided to transport a whole bunch of the Nether Dragons to their nexus, hoping that its energies would reinvigorate them. Now what Tyragosa never considered was whether the blue dragons would be safe from the new guests. The Nether Dragons bathed in the arcane energies of the nexus. The magic was unlike anything they had ever experienced. They wanted all of it, seeing it as a way to make themselves stronger so that no one could control them. The battle that unfolded, it drew the attention of their Lord Malygos. Normally, he ignored what was happening in the outside world, relying on his servants to investigate anomalies, keep watch over Azeroth. Yet he would not ignore an attack on his very own lair. The Nether Dragons were absorbed into his being, and unexpectedly, the energies of the incorporeal creatures, they swept away the haze of suffering and regrets that had clouded his mind. The Nether attack convinced Malygos that he needed to embrace his sacred duty of safeguarding arcane magic on Azeroth once again. And what had happened to the Netherwings, it weighed heavily on Tyragosa's heart. She would return to Outlands to look after a new generation of them. You could find her and Yorut even now within the Netherstorm. And besides that, we only saw Tiri show up another time at the Wormrest Temple. This was at the time during the fight against Deathwing with the Cataclysm.
Thank you, sisters. I am renewed.
That fight is still very much in the future though. Going back to Malygos, the Blues, they had their sane aspect back, which was a great thing for them, but as it turned out, not so much for the world as a whole. He assessed the state of magical affairs, and he was not happy with how the foolish actions of mortal magi had led to war and chaos. Despite being warned that he should never hoard the magic, that's exactly what he did, drawing in all the magical ley lines across the world of Azeroth. And ley lines, they're best described as blood vessels across the planet that contain vast sources of magic and power. He drew all of those magical energies into the Nexus, out of the hands of those foolish creatures that could not be trusted with the power. Yet this duty that was given to him, it was not just for the sake of magic or the population on the planet. Deep inside of Azeroth, there slumbers a world soul that might one day awaken. Malygos' actions, it upset the equilibrium of the world. It sparked natural disasters, all the way from Northrend to the southern tips of Kalimdor and the Eastern Kingdoms. Unless something was going to be done, these disasters, they would spiral out of control, cause irreparable harm to Azeroth's world soul.
Champion! Azeroth cries out for your aid!
So, when the world ventured into Northrend to take care of the threat of the Lich King, their attention was also drawn to the Nexus. Ronin and the Kirintor, they'd rebuild their magical floating citadel of Dalaran, taking it to Northrend to fight in these so-called Nexus Wars. Even the other dragons, after trying to reason with Malygos, they understood that something had to be done. Alexstrasza and ambassadors from the other flights, even some of the Blues, they gathered to discuss what they were going to do. With heavy hearts, they reached an agreement that would become known as the Wormrest Accords. For the good of Azeroth, they would join the side of mortals, make war on Malygos himself. Reaching this decision was not easy on any of them, but especially for Alexstrasza. After all, she saw Malygos as a brother, and as a guardian of life, she abhorred the bloodshed that was to come. Yet if they did nothing, she knew the numbers of lives lost would be unimaginable. After taking out his consort Zaragoza, after venturing through the Nexus, the Oculus, grabbing a key from the undead Sephiroth within Naxxramas, the heroes finally get entry into the Eye of Eternity, where they, with the aid of the Red Dragons, confronted and killed Malygos.
Unthinkable! The mortals will destroy everything! My sister, what have you...
I did what I had to, brother. You gave me no alternative. And so ends the Nexus War.
While members of the Kirintor would spend years reversing the damage done to Azeroth ley lines. The day was saved, Azeroth was saved, but this did mean that the Blue Dragonflight was now without their aspect and their leader. While some of them had understood the necessity of the Wormrest Accords, there were others who most certainly did not. and a bit of a split happened among their flights. A split that would become all the more clear when it was time to pick a new aspect to lead them. According to legend, when the original aspects were empowered, it was done so during a unique celestial event. The Embrace it's called, when the white moon, the mother, holds a blue child. An event that happens once in approximately 430 years. It was believed by the Blues that this would be the best time to pick a new leader, if not a brand new aspect, at least one in title, and two major candidates were to pick from. On the one hand, there was Aragos, son of Malagos. He had been locked away for quite a while, as he was part of the dragons that sacrificed themselves during the War of the Shifting Sands. This war, fought over in Silphus, it ended with a massive wall around Ankiraj to contain the threat of the old god Kafun. We brought the wall low during Classic, after collecting the Scepter of the Shifting Sands, and we set the dragons inside free. Now Aragos, he was a strong supporter of his father's plans, and holds a massive grudge towards Alexstrasza and the world for murdering his father.
Under my leadership, this flight will rise again!
On the other hand, we have Caligos, and true to his nature as a blue dragon, our Kalik is madly drawn to the magic of the worlds. That's why he fell in love with Envina. Envina being the human form used to disguise the remaining powers of the High Elfster Sunwell. It's a bit much to go into, and a story purely told within the comics. Long story short, Envina's true nature, it would be revealed, and while the now Blood Elves promised to keep her safe, their Prince Gilfas became an ally of the Burning Legion, and Envina was taken by Kil'jaeden's forces in an attempt to open up a portal for him during the Burning Crusade. Heroes ventured into the Sunwell Plateau to stop this from happening. Inside, we saw the demise of Kalik's friend Madragosa, but we were able to liberate him out of the clutches of Safrovar the Corrupted. And together, we stood against Kil'jaeden, breaking his hold over Envina, and seeing the might of the Sunwell turned against him.
The spell is broken! Goodbye, Kalik, my love!
The loss of Envina hit him hard, and seeing how it was the Red Dragon Corielstros that had created her to hide away the magic of the Sunwell, his next encounter with Alexstrasza's consort, it was not a happy reunion. Regardless, together, the red and the blue, they managed to stop Sinfaria within the novel Night of the Dragon. Her efforts of creating Twilight Dragons, efforts guided by Deathwing, they did ripple on into the Cataclysm. Being without a leader, it meant that they were weakened, and Kalik feared that Deathwing was going to make use of that and try and take him out. True enough, as within Azara, we joined Kalik in helping out the rather eccentric blue dragon Azuragos, now hunted by the Black Dragonflight. You might recall facing off against Azuragos as he was the world boss during Classic. Adventurers, they took him on for glory and loot, something that he already expected, as his aspects, it had charged him with protecting one of the shards of the Scepter of the Shifting Sands. It's been nothing but a headache and pain ever since, not to mention the sinew that he possessed, which hunters use to make themselves an epic quiver. Getting tired of being hunted down, the Blue decides to hang out within the spirit worlds, when he meets a rather cute spirit healer by the name of Arnara. They're not fools though. They know that their love cannot last. We convince him to come help us out against the Black Dragon threats. Not out of any love for Kalik though. Azuragos doesn't think highly of him and his little hero of the world bits. The idea of him becoming a new aspect is laughable. And that just goes to show that not even Azuragos knows everything. You see, our Kalik, he has no real desire of taking up leadership of their flights. In fact, he was quite afraid of it. What would it mean if they did indeed choose him to lead, to become the next aspect? Would he still be the same Caligos? Would he change? Would everything be different? These fears he discussed with former war chief Vrol within the novel Twilight of the Aspects. And Vrol, he did not make fun of him for having these fears, nor did he think any less. In fact, to him, it only meant that Kalik was very wise.
May the Titans guide us. May we be inspired to choose with wisdom.
What none of them knew, though, was that Aragos had actually allied himself to Deathwing. Voting for him to become the new aspect, it would lead their entire flight into darkness. Something that the Bronze Dragonflight, they could somewhat foresee, they could sense that something was up. And so, they put heroes on the path to find out what was going on and put a stop to it. Easier said than done, though. Just walking up to the Nexus these days, it did not come without its risks. Not all the Blues look kindly upon mortals, after all. Aragos nearly had Thrall himself eaten. Was it not for the blessing of the other aspects and Kalik standing up for him? We were no former war chief, nor a future world shaman. We were just mortals that quickly got caught by Terragosa. Luckily, she's one of the friendlier blues out there, born under the special sign that foretold of her great destiny. If the prophecies are true, then her survival is of vital importance to the entire Blue Flight and to Azeroth itself. Protected and educated by Kalik ever since she was a hatchling, they forged a special bond over the millennia, not unlike what we would call siblings. Together, we venture through the Nexus, where slowly but surely she realizes that something isn't quite right. Now, to make sure that there was no competition for the title of Aspects, Twilight forces are sent out to remove Caligos from the boards.
You shall not have him!
And they would have succeeded, was it not for Terragosa making the ultimate sacrifice. Turns out that that prophecy was true. She was going to play a vital role to the flight, but not in life. Rather, her spirit would be bound to mortal heroes, who, while dealing with the conflicts amongst the Blues, eventually managed to bind her forever to Dragonwrath Terragosa's rests. Her spirit would aid them through the turmoils of the Cataclysm, while the moment of choosing, it had finally come for the Blues. This ritual, as it turned out, it was not an intellectual exercise, nor was it about the vote amongst the Blues for who they thought would be the best candidates. It was not about the title of Aspect, give it to one who would use it as a tool only for himself and his flight. The celestial phenomenon, it was called the Embrace. This was about the heart of the Blue Dragonflight, not its brain. The new Aspect could never be granted powers by thought alone. The Titans had done what they felt was right, and so now, in this moment, had the Blue Dragonflights. They had listened, not just with their minds, but with their hearts, when Frau and Kalik had spoken. So it was that Caligos was chosen and empowered to be their new aspect of magic. Aragos, understandably, was pissed, of course, flying off in a huff, promising that Neltharion was going to take us all, but his allies had no love or loyalty to him. Instead, all they cared about was his blood. Blood that was spilled upon the focusing iris. This is a powerful magical artifact, which they used to bring life to the massive 5-headed chromatic dragon called Chromatus. A successful experiment from the black dragon Neltharion to unite the powers of the different flights into one. Our Chromatus fancied himself mating with Kiragosa, another child of Malagos, sister to Aragos, who'd been taken captive by the Twilight's hammer. She would be able to liberate herself before any of that happened. Their plans were revealed and ultimately stopped. Chromatus was so powerful though that, despite having a brand new aspect on their side, they couldn't just destroy it. An arcane prison was their only option, which houses Chromatus even to this day. Another scheme of Deathwing and the Twilights had failed. Instead of controlling the Blues from within, they now had Caligos as their new aspect to lead them through the war of the Cataclysm, to try and stop the Hour of Twilight, try to stop the mad aspect Deathwing. By using that focusing iris, they were able to pool their powers into that reclaimed Dragon Soul. With Frau at their side, they fought in unity, combining their powers to finally put a stop to Deathwing, and by extension the old god N'Zoth. And despite only recently becoming an aspect, Kalik already had to give up a huge portion of his powers and see the world through mortal eyes. A worthy sacrifice, of course, as the dawn of the Age of Mortals was now upon us. But it also came with great changes. Many of the dragons, they started to wonder what their purpose was now. If they fulfilled their grand destiny, what more could they do? Some of the Blues actually started to leave the Nexus in search of answers for themselves, and Kalik couldn't blame them. He himself wondered what he was going to do, and he asked Kiragosa, his beloved friend and sweet sister of the spirits, if she thought that the flight would choose him again, even now. Truth had ever been one of Kiragosa's most cherished ideals, and she looked at him, searching for an answer that was both true and comforting, and she could not find it. The question would linger as dire news reached them. As a precaution, they decided to move the focusing iris and hide it away, just in case someone might want to take advantage of the weakened states. En route, the focusing iris had been stolen, and looking for it brought Kalik the Fedamore into the magical company of Miss Jaina Proudmoore. Their time together blossomed into romance, but he wouldn't find the focusing iris until it was already far too late. Turns out that it was stolen by the Horde, turned into a mana bomb, and dropped upon her city. The Age of Mortals, it was definitely kicked off with a bang. In retaliation, Jaina wanted to use the focusing iris to flood all of Orgrimmar, but Frau and Kalik were able to change her mind. Instead, she used the powers gathered to defeat Garrosh, and then, considering that Fedamore was gone, she decided to join the Kirintor within Dalaran, even becoming their leader with her beloved Caligos at her side. For now, his place would be with her. Earlier, he had spoken with Kitagosa again, and she had told him that he was at a crossroads, as all of them were. Either the Blues were going to need him to lead them well and lead them wisely, or they were going to need to be set free to find their own paths, be the leaders of their own lives. After all, did they truly have a purpose higher than the duties to themselves, she asked, to which he asked her, "Where will you go?" Those 4 words telling Kitagosa of his choice, setting her and the others free to find their own destiny. Hers would take her to see more of the world, to visit warmer climates than that of Northrend, whereas his, that was to be in Dalaran, with the focusing iris guarded in its vaults. The question of what now did not just plague Calic's flight though. Even the other aspects were questioning their place in the world, even considering breaking up and just have each go their own way. But Calic wouldn't let that happen. After finding a strange magical artifact near the remains of Galagrond within Dragonblight, and seeing the world through the eyes of Proto-Dragon Malygos, seeing the dawn of the aspects, the battle against Galagrond, and the empowerment by Keeper Tyr, he came back with knowledge and understanding, knowing that, while they might have a great deal less power, that they still had strength and purpose, even before becoming the aspects, and that the world, they could always use their guidance into this new age.
This world is full of wonder.
An age of conflict and strife, as the world united against War Chief Garrosh Hellscream, and then saw the biggest invasion of the Burning Legion as of yet. The relationship between Calic and Jaina, it's been quite rocky. Their different opinions when it comes to the Horde and the safety of the world, it's made it all but impossible for them to stay together. She would even leave Dalaran and the Kirin Tor, unable to stand with them as they agreed with Khadgar and voted to let the Horde back in. Our Blue Dragon aspect stayed with them, even became a member of the Council of Six, the rulers of the city. And the war against the Legion, it had them help out the mages with the Order Hall, their quest of finding powerful artifacts to take the battle to the Legion. Some of them would even venture back into the Nexus, save Azuragos again, this time from the Epherium. His opinion on Calic, it seems to have changed a bit, and he asked heroes to give him his regards. While Azuragos, he will stay behind to secure the Nexus, to make sure that it would never again fall into the wrong hands.
I thank you for freeing me. You have given me the greatest gift of all. That of time.
With those powerful artifacts in hand, our adventures of Legion had us scour the Broken Isles, make new friends, make new allies, while fighting against the demons. Allies like the Blue Dragon Stellagosa, who could use her aid as she's been captured. After saving her, she also asked for a bit more help with her grandfather Senegos, leader of the Azure Wing.
There's Old, and then there's Senegos.
Senegos could very well be one of the oldest Blue Dragons around, but he's not exactly doing great. Still enough strength left within him to help us out. In return, we help him and his kin, strengthening him enough to keep on going, and ultimately fighting off the wizards that tried to devour him.
The Dragonflights will rise again.
Earning the friendship of Amagosa, adding the great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter of Senegos to our Battle Pet collection. Then, during the Nightborn Rebellion, as we work together with Arcanist Voltois to redirect the ley lines in Azuna, Stellagosa shows up again, wondering why we're messing with the magics of the land. At first, the Nightborn and the dragon, they don't really get along with each other, but soon enough they recognize each other's skills and competence. Respect is earned on both sides, and while Voltois usually only thinks highly of herself, Stellagosa's knowledge and skills, it has her wanting to know more and more about her.
You go on ahead and inform Thalyssra. I have a few questions for our friend here.
Yes? What do you want to know?
Do you actually visualize the lines? Or is it more that you sense them? Is it a constant sensation? Or can you turn it on and off?
Which had some wonder if there was perhaps more going on between them. Perhaps another magical relationship. But sadly, nothing further has come of this. Which leaves me with the final thing that I want to mention, as I think we've been going on for long enough. There was Caligos and the Blue Dragonflight that would of course join us in a war against the old god N'Zoth during Battle for Azeroth. This is the old god that they credited for signing Deathwing's paychecks, as they described it back then. He was the one fully empowering the mad aspect during the Cataclysm, and with Battle for Azeroth, the old god actually released from its prison. Fighting back was going to take a whole lot, like empowering our heart with the power of the different flights. We joined Calic into the Vermilion Redoubt to find out why Queen Alexstrasza had not answered a call for aid. Turns out that she was under attack by Vexiona and her brood, a void-infused Twilight Dragon. We managed to force it to retreat, earn the full support of the different flights, and cleanse the world of Azeroth from its old god's infection. And that's pretty much the major story behind the Blue Dragonflight. A flight that has suffered immensely at the hands of Deathwing, with a leader that's gone mad, others amongst their flight that try to pick up the pieces and carry on their mission. With a new leader chosen, they fulfilled their destiny and found themselves wanting for a purpose. A fractured family that even to this day, it's still trying to find its place within the world. Today, it's time that we recognize the queen, the one that rules all the dragons, and of course her Red Dragonflight. Today, we're gonna be talking about Alexstrasza.
I bring life and hope.
She was empowered by the Keepers and the Titans, after the, at the time, Proto-Dragons banded together to end the threat of Galagrond. Her blessing came from Aeonar, the Lifebinder. This is my gift, compassion for all living things, a drive to protect and nurture them, and the ability to heal that which others cannot, birth what others may not, and love even the unlovable, who surely need such grace more than any other souls.
Do you think I have big mom energy?
That's right, Alexstrasza will be your mommy. Her natural gift of leadership, it made her a perfect candidate to be queen of all the dragons. And being the aspect of life, it means exactly that. Where a Neltharion would take care of the world, or a Malygos would guard the domain of magic, she would care of its life, no matter where it came from. But interestingly enough, their powers do not just end at the crosshold of the domain of life, they know death equally well. We've seen examples where fallen enemies were reanimated, their memories of life used to find hidden secrets, or perhaps a more widely known resurrection, there was Bolvar Fordragon, who fell at the Wrath Gates. When the dragon's fire cleansed the area of the Blight, it also brought him back to life. Unsure if this was their intention or if it was an accidental side effect. Either way, they are aware that he is charred and alive, but he's now in the hands of the Lich King, something that they kept hidden from the heroes of the world. They must not discover the fate of the young paladin. Not yet, the Queen of the Dragons told Corialstras. And so, it was quite a shocker surprise for the Alliance and the Horde when they entered Icecrown Citadel and realized that Bolvar had been tortured by the Lich King and was still very much alive.
The dragon's flame. Seal my fate.
Not sure why they decided to keep that a secret. Now the healing powers are not without limit though. As for example, we've seen during the Crusader Bride and Brad questline, not even the breath of the Queen could cleanse his body that was suffering from the plague of undeath. The domain of the Reds is that of life, and to create life there has to be a lot of mating. From an egg clutch that holds, say, 36 of them, only half would hatch, and only half of those would actually survive to adulthood. But that's the way of dragons, a harsh beginning heralding a life of glory and wonder. Alexstrasza had a fair few consorts for this mating, from a Tyranastras, who was the oldest and her first, to her youngest, Corialstras, who she added most recently. Most recently being over 10,000 years ago now, as that description comes from the time of the War of the Ancients. Back when the magical fount of power, known as the Well of Eternity, was being used to summon Sargeras and the Burning Legion onto the worlds. Deathwing manipulated his fellow aspects into sacrificing a portion of their power into the Dragon Soul to stop this invasion. His madness would be revealed when he turned the soul not only on the demons, but also the Night Elves and his fellow dragons. Alexstrasza tried to reason with her fellow aspects, have him fight the madness that had overtaken him, and destroy the disc before it was too late. But her words could no longer reach him. His mind was too far gone. So they combined forces with the defenders of Azeroth, like the Night Elves, eventually turned the tide of battle. Not only did that mean the defeat of Deathwing and take the now demon soul out of his possession, it also prevented the Burning Legion from claiming the worlds at a great price. And thanks to Illidan Stormrage, we did see a creation of a brand new well. He had taken some vials of the original one, and knowing how the previous one had nearly led to the destruction of the world, the others weren't too happy with what he had done. To contain and hide its power, Alexstrasza used an enchanted seed to sprout a mighty tree over the well. Nordrassil, it was called. Its boughs soon towered over the lake, scraping the belly of the heavens. Its roots grew deep into the earth, spreading life-giving energies across the war-torn worlds. Thereafter, the great tree would act as a seal over the new Well of Eternity, preventing the Legion or anyone else from abusing its powers. The Night Elves vowed to keep it safe and protect the Well of Eternity at any cost. To honor this decision, the remaining dragon aspects agreed to bless the tree, and by extension the Night Elves, so that they could perform their guardianship successfully. The Queen infused Nordrassil with renewed strength and vitality. That, in combination with immortality provided by Nosdormu, it meant that the Night Elves would stay at the dragon's side for millennia, helping them safeguard the land and sharing these duties. The bond between elves and dragons grew ever closer. One day, we'd even see Queen Alexstrasza and her sister Ysera guide the wedding ceremony between Tyrande Whisperwind and Malfurion Stormrage. Now, while the Queen and the Reds loved all life, there are certain lines you do not cross. Few beings are considered truly evil by her, and even they are not necessarily beyond redemption. Change is inherent in life after all. As long as something lives, it can grow. It can seek the light or the darkness. It is only when it chooses the darkness so completely that life itself is endangered that the Queen would say that there is no hope. No hope for the entire Black Dragonflight, as the actions of their lord and the corruption within it had the other dragons hunt their flight to near extinction. That didn't stop him from being a threat though, quite the opposite. Millennia later, she would find herself under attack by Deathwing again, this time indirectly. You see, the aspects, they'd hidden away the demon soul on Azeroth, and they cast magical protections on it, preventing any dragon from ever wielding the disc again. Magics that had no effect on the alien orcs that had come through the Dark Portal. Deathwing started to show them visions, guided them to the disc, instructed them on how to wield it. Its terrible might, it forced the Dragon Queen into submission, and by extension, her whole entire flight. Now they had to do what the orcs wanted them to do, carry them in battle against the Alliance, cause death and destruction, but the Queen was forced to mate, breed with her consorts, produce more eggs, children, dragon units to add to their ranks. Deathwing could not have done worse to her, could not have inflicted more pain to the flight of life than by turning them into bringers of death. Not much they could do about it though, not as long as the orcs held the soul. Yet despite this draconic might added to the ranks, the Horde still lost the war over Azeroth. They were pushed back all the way through the Dark Portal, and this pushed the remaining Dragonmark clan into barricading themselves within Grim Batol, securing themselves as well as the Red Dragon Queen. Even now, you can still see the place where they held her in-game, and while her flight desperately wanted to set her free, perhaps none as much as a consort Corialstras. His queen was everything to him. It meant more than his own life and safety, which he would gladly put on the line for her sake. You might remember seeing him at the Wrathgate or at the Wormrest Temple, but it's pretty much when it comes to the events in-game. Not so much in the books though, he has had many adventures completely off-screen. When the Bronze Dragon Nosdormu got stuck in time due to manipulation of the Old Gods, who was it that he called for help? Corialstras, of course, who together with Ronin and Broxigar, they were sent back 10,000 years, back to that War of the Ancients, where he got to relive the terrible tragedy again. Time travel is an interesting concept, which we will definitely dive deeper into when dealing with the Bronze Dragonflight. Now, considering that there was already one of him there in the timeline, there was already an original that had seen the war play out, our Corialstras felt only half the dragon than he usually did. Only when he was with his counterparts, when he held the scale of himself close, did he feel at full power. But his influence would still play a massive role in the war. It would change quite a bit of it, which of course makes you wonder how the original war had played out without him. Now, he couldn't share what he knew about Deathwing, the bits that he actually remembered beyond the fog of time travel. They were unable to get past his lips. The Black Behemoth recognized that he knew something, placed spells upon him to stop him from dropping these spoilers. Regardless, Corialstras played a massive role during the war, and he saw it through with his allies, making sure that, although the details might have changed, the world still overcame the threat of the Legion. In between, he even managed to save some of the Blue Dragonflight's eggs, a clutch that was abandoned by Malygos when he felt the madness, a clutch that contained the eggs of both Aragos and his sister Kiragosa. Enough for them to survive, but not for the flight to thrive. Hide them away in a pocket universe where time ran extremely slow, long enough to pass them on to one that he could trust, assuming that he survived the war, which he did, but their ally Broxigar did not. Back in his own time, Cressus disguised himself as an orc to bring back the ex of Broxigar to War Chief Thrall, sharing with him the epic tales of glory, honoring the orc that had sacrificed himself, stood up against the dark titan Sargeras himself, and had saved the entire world. That was a brilliant adventure through time, with his buddy Ronin at his sides. But they weren't always the best of friends. When he first approached the red-haired mage, disguised as Cressus, he saw the human more as a tool to be used, rather than an ally. That's how desperate Coriolstres was to save his beloved from the orcs. Because unlike some of the dragons, Coriolstres actually cared about the mortals that shared their world. He kept a close eye on them, worked subtly from the shadows to keep the world turning, positioning himself within the Kirin Tor and the Council of Six, which provided him quite a bit of power and influence. He'd even spend some of his spare time prophesizing, predicting the day that Miss Jaina Proudmoore had to become the leader of the Kirin Tor. Events for the future. Knowing that his Alexstrasza was imprisoned and forced to do who knows what, it pushed him to his limits. Ronin wasn't the only one that he recruited to his side either. At risk of his own life, he visited the other aspects and begged them to take action. Don't forget, at this point in time, Malygos was still quite insane. Nosdormu was all but lost to the sense of time, and while Ysera would love to help her sister out, he had no real plan, which didn't result in all of them being enslaved to the Dragon Soul as well. It all seemed terribly hopeless, but that didn't stop Arcresis. He was still there for his queen, and so were Ronin, Verisa, and Falstad. In the end, even the other aspects were roused out of their own problems by him, ready to fight the good fight. Not only did they manage to liberate the queen out of the hands of the orcs, the demon soul was also destroyed. The aspects' powers were returned, and for the first time in millennia, Deathwing was forced to face his fellow aspects as equals. He was going to pay for all that she had been forced to endure, the many years of torment, the death of her consort Tyrannastras.
I will mourn your death.
Alexstrasza rose before him, the terrible nemesis. She gazed at Deathwing, still in part with pity, and said, "Life is my aspect, Dark One, and I, like all mothers, know both the pain and wonder that entails. For the past several years, I have watched my children be raised as instruments of war, slaughtered if they proved insufficient or too willful. I have lived, knowing that so many died that I could do nothing for. Your words mean nothing to me," Deathwing roared as he futilely struggled to shrug off the other's horrific assaults. "Nothing!" "No, they likely do not. Which is why I shall let you experience firsthand all that I have suffered." And she did just that. Against any other attack, even the nightmares of Ysera, Deathwing, he could summon some form of defense, but against Alexstrasza's, he had no weapon upon which to draw. She attacked with pain, but it was her pain. She dealt not with agony as he knew it, but with that of a loving mother who suffered with each child torn from her, with each child turned into something terrible, with each child who perished. You will go through all I've gone through, Dark One. Let us see if you fare any better than I did. But Deathwing had no experience in such suffering. It tore him where the pain of vicious talons or ripping teeth could not, for it tore him in his very being. The most terrible of dragons screamed, as none had ever heard a dragon scream before. That perhaps was all that saved him. So startled were the others by it, that they faltered in their own spells. Able at last to rip free, Deathwing turned and fled, flying fast and furious. They would try to hunt the Dark One down, while also gather what remained of their flight, mourn the consorts that she lost, recover their eggs and rebuild their home. Ronin, Verisa, and Falstad would forevermore be friends of the Red Dragons, and Coriolstres finally had his beloved back. Her time with the orcs had been gruesome. Not only would she feel the lash of the demon soul when she disobeyed, the pain inflicted upon her, that was something she could deal with, but to make her comply, they also took her eggs, smashed them in front of her, smeared the yolk of her unborn child upon her face. That kept her in line, and the Dragonlore in Warcraft, it's some of the more darker, gruesome areas of the story. Even so, when years later they asked her how she felt about the orcs, she said that she has no quarrel with any race on Azeroth. That is the heart of the Lifebinder, capable of forgiving even the most horrific events and offering love to all that want it. Yet love wasn't enough to resolve the conflicts and corruption that started so long ago. Not just Deathwing caused trouble to the world, his consorts and children did as well. There was a son Nefarian, performing horrific experiments within the Blackrock Mountain. He wanted to combine the powers of the different dragonflights into one. And most of the experiments failed, but those that did come out successful were incredibly powerful. A great threat to the world, one that had to be stopped. The world was told of what was happening in the mountain, the allegiance between the Black Dragonflight and this so-called Dark Horde. Philastres offered the heroes aid in making the Seal of Ascension, which gave them access to Upper Blackrock Spire, and there they could summon his spirit to assist them in battle against Rend Blackhand. Then inside Blackwing Lair, they discovered something horrific. Vilastras had tried to stop Nefarian on his own and had paid a terrible price.
Flame! Death! Destruction! Cower mortals before the wrath of Lord... No! I must fight this! Alexstrasza, help me! I must fight!
His desperate plea calls out to his queen, to his mother, and the heroes are empowered beyond their limits. Mana, energy, rage, and runic power generation, it was through the roof. Burning adrenaline pumped through their veins, increasing their damage done. But all this power, it was too much for their mortal bodies to hold. Death was inevitable if they were going to take too long. Now our heroes emerged victorious and conquered the entire mountain, stopping Nefarian and his gruesome experiments, at least for the moment. Another aspect that caused trouble to the world, that was Malygos the Blue. Around the Wrath of the Lich King periods, when his sanity was restored. The aspects, he looked around the world and he found that mortals were abusing the magic that he was charged to protect. Deciding to hoard all of the magic into his lair of the Nexus, the aspect caused massive devastation to the world, and something had to be done. Even the dragons realized that they could not sit idly by. At Wyrmrest Temple, a grand tower in Dragonblight, forged by the keepers to strengthen their bond, serve as the heart of dragons' culture and be a sanctuary where they could gather and discuss their activities. They came together and they formed the Wyrmrest Accords, the union of dragons, opposing the madness of Malygos. Even though Black Dragonflight had Nellis to represent them, Caligos would stand there for the Blues, entering the Nexus War side by side with the mortals of the world. One of the earlier plans of attack that was together with Kerestrazza. We were going to lure out the Lord of the Nexus by slaying his consort Saragossa. Then, the might of the Red, under the leadership of Riloras, they could be unleashed. But it wasn't enough. And seeing how Kerestrazza had slain his mate, Malygos decided that the Red was going to replace her. Whether the torture inflicted on her was revenge for the death of Saragossa, or a misguided attempt to turn her into an ally, is known only to Malygos. Regardless of his intent, by the time that we find it again within the Nexus, her sanity is all but gone, and we have no other choice but to slay our ally.
Finish it! Finish it! Kill me, or I swear by the Dragon Queen you'll never see daylight again!
And so we do, ending the suffering of our comrades, and eventually, with the aid of Wyrmrest Accords, we even brought Malygos low.
Unthinkable! The mortals will destroy everything! My sister, what have you...
I did what I had to, brother. You gave me no alternative. And so ends the Nexus War. This resolution pains me deeply, but the destruction, the monumental loss of life had to end. Regardless of Malygos's recent transgressions, I will mourn his loss. He was once a guardian, a protector. This day, one of the world's mightiest has fallen.
Which, as we discussed last week, caused quite a rift amongst the Blue Dragonflight. Some of them agreed with the Queen and the Wyrmrest Accord, but others, they were more on the side of their Lord Malygos. A rift that became all the more clear when it was time to pick a new leader. The Blues would go for Caligos as the new aspect, while Eragos had secretly allied himself to Deathwing. His blood would animate Nefarian's successful creation known as Chromatus, a massive 5-headed dragon that Thrawn the Aspects took on in the novel Twilight of the Aspects. Their combined might was able to stop Chromatus, but the beastie, it was so powerful that they couldn't simply destroy it. Instead, it was locked away within an arcane prison, where it remains even to this day. Yet, that wasn't the only threat actively working against the flights at the time. In essence, the book, it had Thrall go around teaching the Aspects how to be Aspects again, while Deathwing and his forces did everything they could to remove the flights from the boards. One of their schemes had them infiltrate the hatcheries down below Wyrmrest Temple. You might recall raiding there near the end of Wrath of the Lich King as we went into the Cataclysm. Heroes were asked to enter the Obsidian Sanctum, which was the sanctum of the Black Dragonflight, and in there they took care of its guardians. As Alexstrasza's children, they had located a clutch of Twilight Dragon eggs, which was of course a great threat to the world. These Twilight Dragons are a creation of Sinfaria by experimenting and pushing forward with the Netherwing Dragons. The team up of Corialstras and Caligos, we'd already seen them save the day before, as they dealt with Anvina and the hidden powers of the Sunwell. Their second adventure together saw the demise of Sinfaria within the novel Night of the Dragon. But her experimentation, it was picked up by the mastermind Deathwing and pushed forward, as we can see within the Sanctum. Then we saw them strike out at the Ruby Sanctum, the domain of the Reds, and once more heroes ventured inside to slay those that dared to come for the axe. The other flights, they also hold their young here, but sadly those portals have never been made active, but the breeding grounds, they would be a target once more. And this time, there was no time for the mortal heroes to rise up. The attack came swiftly and silently. The Twilight Hammer corrupted the unborn children while they still slumbered within their eggs. Not just the Reds, but all sanctums had been infiltrated and corrupted. The only one who saw the attack was Coriostras, and while he managed to slay the attackers, there was nothing he could do to reverse the damage. All their children would hatch as deformed chromatic dragons, and the corruption was already spreading to his own body as well. With his beloved queen on his mind, the one who had always come first for him, he gathered up all his energy and magic, falling it in on himself. He took a deep, steadying breath and whispered a single word, "Beloved." And then it went dark, detonating and destroying all of their sanctums. All of the corrupted children instantly wiped out. A great tragedy. But the alternative, seeing it come back as chromatic dragons, it would have been way worse. Now the other dragons had no idea what went down, of course. Some even started to whisper that Coriosas had betrayed them. Doubt crept even into the Lifebinder's heart, and the depression that followed, it nearly took out her and the Wormrest Accord. It was thanks to Thrall that she was shared a vision by the Spirit of Life. A vision that revealed the truth to her, that Coriostras, to the bitter end, had always been the best of them. How could she have doubted him? Even for a moment.
It pains me, Neltharion, but I must end you, as I have ended Malagos.
End me, Lifebinder. You think life is yours to take away? Life is weak, mortal, fleeting, fragile. Death is final. Death is eternal. Death is my realm. Look upon me, and you see death incarnate, the unmaker of worlds.
I see the hollow metal shell of a once great ally, and the precious gift of the Titans wasted.
Then witness my new gifts, bestowed by this world's true masters!
She had a one-on-one with him in the Twilight Highlands, where she nearly sacrificed it all to bring the behemoth down. Assisting her in the confrontation, there was her son, Silestras. He was part of the dragon crew that sacrificed themselves during the War of the Shifting Sands in order to contain the threat of the old god within Ankh-Kiraj. Heroes reforged the scepter and broke down the Scarab Wall during Classic, releasing the 3 dragons trapped inside. Now, after witnessing his mother's fight with Deathwing here, the only other time that we would see him, that would be within the Bastion of Twilight, when he joined Heroes in confronting the resurrected Sinestra and their Twilight Dragon brood.
Syntharia! Your master owes me a great debt! One that I intend to extract from his consort's hide!
Laying down his life to empower the heroes, give them the chance to bring Sinestra low.
You should feel honored to be worthy of its expenditure! Now! Die!
The fire's dim, champions. Take this, the last of my power. Succeed where I have failed. Avenge me. Avenge.
The confrontation between his mother and Deathwing, that would not be the last. Their fight wasn't going to end that easily. This was going to take everything that the world of Azeroth and the dragons had to throw at them. Some of them even decided to cross some lines, like Ria Straza in the Badlands. She had taken Exandra captive, and just like the orcs had treated their queen, Rhea was forcing Exandra to lay eggs for their experiments, to create something that the world hadn't seen in millennia, an uncorrupted black dragon. Rephion, and with her aid and a bit of titanic magic, their experiments actually succeeded. Deathwing then catches wind of what we're doing here, and decimates Riastraza and the eggs. Or so he believes. He actually only destroyed her eggs, the last one given to us to take care of. Meanwhile, Rephion is already far away, even hatches, becomes the very thing that the Red Dragonflight wanted him to be. He was a true guardian of Azeroth, an uncorrupted black dragon, but one who wasn't down with being controlled by the Reds. He would draw his own plans for the salvation of the world, where heroes took the battle to Deathwing at the Wormrest Temple. Through time they ventured to grab the Dragon Soul from the past, empower it with the might of the aspects, former War Chief Thrall subjugating as the aspect of Earth, while the forces of the Wormrest Accords, led by Lord Devrestras, occupied the temple. Mortals and dragons, they stood shoulder to shoulder at the Maelstrom. Their combined might blasted Deathwing with everything they had, and finally, the cataclysm was over. Not without great sacrifice, though. Not only had the aspects given up a huge portion of their power, not only did they have to see the world through mortal eyes now, on top of all of that, they could also no longer reproduce. No more whelplings for any of them. A harsh reward from the Titans, especially for the aspect of life. All the harsher when the Death Knights during Legion ventured into the Ruby Sanctum, and there were offered a choice by the Lich King. They could just go in and find the answers that they were looking for, do what they had to do to get their mounts, or they could embrace their inner darkness and wipe out anything in sight, earning themselves the unholy determination feat of strength.
You are empty inside, just like me.
By now, Blizzard has decided to remove that achievement, but the Red Flight still doesn't look kindly upon them for resurrecting Kiranastras into undeath and into their personal mounts. Those actions are not quickly forgiven or forgotten, and they also change their mind when it comes to the whole reproduction thing. In an interview back in 2017 with Ian Hazacostas, Jesse Cox, and Wow Crendor, they already discussed that it was never their intention to slam the door on dragon lore. It was going to take some building up, but they were going to be able to reproduce again and give it more story in the future. Considering they were now looking at Dragonflight on the horizon, it seems that the time has come to further that story. That is what's to come. Now going back to the end of the Cataclysm and the dawn of the Age of Mortals, the dragons wondered what their purpose and their role was going to be in this new world. The aspects gathered and made plans to disband the Wormrest Accords. Each just go their own way and find their own destiny in life. But Kalecgos wasn't going to let that happen. They might have lost a lot, but they already had value and purpose, even before being empowered by the Titans. They would have value and purpose in this new age as well. The domain of life and the world as a whole. They would always need the gentle heart of Alexstrasza and her flights. Azeroth needed them, especially when the old god N'Zoth was released from his prison during Battle for Azeroth. At the familiar Redoubt, we saw Alexstrasza under attack by Vexiona and her brood, a void-infused Twilight Dragon. But our efforts saved the day, and the dragon's powers were imbued into our heart of Azeroth.
Long has my flight protected all life on Azeroth, and so shall we continue for as long as we draw breath. Accept this gift. May it light a flame within you to burn bright through the darkest times.
And so it did, straight through the darkness of Nyalofa and the old god N'Zoth, cleansing the world of its old god's infection. The last time that we saw Alexstrasza in the story, and the last thing that I want to mention about the Red Dragonflight, that was the Aether sister Ysera within the Shadowlands. She was in need of a token of lost love, and she knew none to love more and stronger than her sister Alexstrasza. She was expecting a token in relation to her consort Coriaustras, but instead, we got a toy gifted to her where they were still proto-dragons. Now, while her love for her consort is everlasting, she had never loved anyone more than Ysera.
And champion, please tell my sister that she is sorely missed, fondly remembered, and deeply loved.
Today we're going to be moving over and speak about her sister, Ysera and the Green Dragonflight.
I dream and the world trembles.
Ysera was empowered by the Keepers and the Titans after the, at the time, Proto-Dragons banded together to end the threat of Galagrond. Her blessing, like that of Alexstrasza, it came from Eonar the Lifebinder. You are bound to the waking dream of creation. Nature is your realm, and all things have caught glimpses of the Emerald Dream when they sleep. You see them all, Ysera, and they see you, though they may not know it. Like the Lifebinder, you touch all living beings and sing to them the songs of creation and interconnectedness. Her flight's domain would be that of nature, which comes with its very own realm called the Emerald Dream. The place is really interesting, and even though we have adventured through it a bit now, it's still a little bit vague on what it's all about. Even its origin, even its creation is still uncertain. Some believe that it was Keeper Freya who wove the Emerald Dream into being from nothing. Others claim that this strange place had always existed in some form, perhaps a dream born from Azeroth's slumbering world soul. Freya merely tapped into that, opened up pathways into the realm, and molded what would become known as the Emerald Dream as a way to commune with the nascent Titan. Personally, I'd say that there's more to support the idea that the realm always existed, although probably not just as a dream from the slumbering world soul, and that our Freya tapped into it. She started molding it, making a stronger connection between the Emerald Dream and Azeroth as a whole. The ethereal realm of spirits and untamed nature, which exists alongside the world of Azeroth, is shaped to act as a map for the evolutionary path of Azeroth's flora and fauna. The two realms are bound as one. As life ebbs and flows across the physical world, the spiritual energies that saturate the Emerald Dream keep pace with it. It's been described as the blueprint for Azeroth, the way that the world would look like if it was completely free to grow without other influences. Although tied to the physical world, the Emerald Dream is a place that most mortal minds would find alien and surreal. But some of those minds, by channeling druidic magic, they can enter a state of dreaming and consciously navigate the Emerald Dream. Use it almost as if Azeroth would have multiple layers, and within the dream you can dive deeper through those layers. A neat little trick that was once used by Malfurion Stormrage to disable magics and fight against his foes. Their thoughts can also shape and influence portions of this verdant spirit realm. But the imprint that their dreamers leave behind is never permanent. Within the dreamways, time and distance are mutable. A day on the physical world, it could feel like decades in the dream. Some places that we know for the dream, that will be the Rift of Aln, a small corner of the Emerald Dream, but a vast, deep fissure, which is believed to be where the magical realm itself originated. Legends say that then Freya's shaping of the realm began with Gahanir, the Mother Tree. There's also Daronir, another great tree where the druids of the pack were left behind to slumber, only to be summoned back onto Azeroth and start spreading the Worgen curse. Then we got the Eye of Ysera, basically the Green Dragon's main base of operations. Now seeing how she was bound to this ethereal realm, Ysera descended into an endless trance and became known thereafter as the Dreamer. With the Shadowlands, we learn a bit more about the inner workings of the Emerald Dream, which is why I would say that there's more to the idea of the realm always existing and Freya just tapping into it. Not only is the Emerald Dream connected to Azeroth, it's also connected to Ardenweald, a domain within the Shadowlands where there's this whole big cycle of life and death and rebirth. Where Ardenweald would be described as autumn and winter in a life cycle, the dream represents the spring and summer. So say that a being dies and is sent off to Ardenweald, they will spend their time slumbering and recovering, being infused with anima. Once the time is right, and once they so desire, they could return. A prime example of this is what happened with the demigod Cenarius, a wild god that we know on Azeroth, and wild gods, they have their connection to the dream once again thanks to Freya. Now you might remember how Cenarius was slain in Warcraft 3. His spirit then zipped out to Ardenweald, where he recovered. He then returned to the dream, to be summoned onto Azeroth again with the Cataclysm. The domain of Ardenweald that is run by the Winter Queen, and her sister is the goddess Elune. It's uncertain if they mean sisters in blood, or sisters by the same method of creation, or merely sisters in spirit forever connected in a sacred cycle. Regardless, her sister is Elune, the goddess of not just the Night Elves, but more races within the Warcraft universe. Which makes you wonder that if Elune is the representation of life, is connected through the Emerald Dream, and worshipped by more races than just the one on Azeroth, could it also mean that the Emerald Dream is connected to more worlds than just Azeroth itself? Who knows? But what is kind of cool is that this connection between the Emerald Dream, Elune, and Ysera, it's not entirely out of the blue. There's always been a connection between them through their family situation. Once upon a time, legends say that Elune, in whatever form you can imagine, they had a child with Malorn. That child is Cenarius, whose mother is now Elune, as you know, while the stepmother, that would be Ysera. Which is why she was so devastated when, during the War of the Ancients, Malorn had entered battle to protect his son, fought one-on-one with Archimonde, but a terrible crack echoed across the battlefield as the overlord of the Legion's forces snapped Malorn's neck. Vines then started to creep around Archimonde. Malfurion Stormrage, not wanting to fail his Shondo, not wanting to fail his teacher. He unleashed a small portion of his terrible potential, but Archimonde merely brought his hands together and vanished in a blaze of green flame. Still though, forcing Archimonde to retreat from the battlefield, it was no small feat. Stormrage, who proved to be an exceptionally gifted druid, learned to walk the dream under the guidance of his teacher Cenarius. This skill had already allowed him to infiltrate Azara's palace, find out what the Queen and her advisor Xavius were up to. At the time, unbeknownst to the rest of the kind, they had made contact with Sargeras and the Legion, and they wanted for the Dark Titan to visit the world. Malfurion did his best to close the portals and stop this war from ever happening. Taking on Xavius, used the powers of nature to destroy him. But being so close to the gateway, it meant that the advisor's spirit, it was taken by Sargeras, who stripped away the parts until only that which is one pleased him remained. Transformed into the first of the satyrs, Xavius was sent back with a score to settle. While transforming more of the kind into satyrs, while progressing the invasion of the Legion, he also set his eyes on hurting Malfurion. Removed the druid from play by kidnapping his beloved Tyrande Whisperwind. Bad move on Xavius' part, as Malfurion did not just kill him for kidnapping Tyrande, he turned him into a tree. Trapped and fully aware of everything that was happening around him, even feeling the pain of the world itself. Tyrande would later be saved. The world of Azeroth would unite with the dragons to stop the Legion's invasion. With the power to grant their foes nightmares, the Greens were extremely powerful on the battlefield. And in the end, they managed to claim victory, but at a great price. The world of Azeroth sundered apart, and Xavius the Tree would sink down below, come in contact with some very old friends.
Deal. I like deal.
Who are you?
Malfurion's twin brother Illidan provided them all with a new Well of Eternity. An action that they couldn't appreciate, considering the war and devastation that they just experienced over the original well. Nordrassil's boughs soon towered over the lake, scraping the belly of the heavens. Its roots grew deep into the earth, spreading life-giving energies across this war-torn world. Thereafter, the great tree would act as a seal over the new Well of Eternity, preventing the Legion or anyone else from abusing its powers. The Night Elves vowed to keep it safe and protect the Well of Eternity at any cost. Mortals and dragons working side by side for ages to come. There were even epic dragon riders, blessed by Ysera herself to ride their brood into battle. That is, until Deathwing caught wind of this, had his lieutenant Razormaw to murder them all. Now to honor the elves' decision to stand with them, the remaining dragon aspects, they agreed to bless the World Tree and the Night Elves so that they could perform their guardianship successfully. Ysera's blessing, it offered them easier access into the dream, as from this point on, more of Malfurion's kind would follow him on that road of druidship, guiding and helping the restoration and growth of the world. An important task, but that did mean long periods of time slumbering and walking the dream, which left the other elves to take care of the physical world. A world that houses the threat of the old gods, locked away ages ago by the Titans. These newly trained druids, Fendrel Stackhelm to be more precise, they would also be responsible for giving them entry into the dream, become the main threat that Ysera and her kind had to deal with, the so-called Emerald Nightmare. Up in the cold land of Northrend, there we find Ulduar and the prison of Yogg-Saron. The world sundering after the War of the Ancients, it had weakened the old god's prison, and its corruption was popping up across Northrend's surface in the form of Serenites, sapping the life of the native flora and fauna. Fendrel and a few druids, they figured that since Nordrassil had helped heal the lands around Mount Hyjal, the same could be done to fix this corruption in Northrend. Some of his colleagues advised him to seek the guidance of the aspects first. After all, it was their blessing that it let Nordrassil do its thing, but Stackhelm wouldn't wait. Rather than waste time in endless debates, he took 6 enchanted branches from the boughs of Nordrassil and went to work. The branches quickly took roots and became new trees. Together, they acted like conduits, channeling the powers of the Emerald Dream into the waking world, which strengthened the nearby wildlife, scoured these Serenite deposits. Things were actually looking great. They planted their last and greatest branch in the mountains of Northrend, over the largest grove of Serenites. This new world tree they named Andrassil, and it grew with astonishing speeds. The benefits were almost immediate. The spread of the Serenites ceased, and wildlife flourished anew. Malfurion and their Cenarian circle, they were pissed at Fendrel, but the plan seemingly had worked. For several decades, Andrassil grew bigger and bigger, towering over Northrend, its roots going ever deeper, until they reached Yogg-Saron's subterranean prison. The old god infused the tree with its foul energies, and so all living creatures in the area were slowly being driven to madness. Once they found out, the druids knew that there was no saving the tree anymore. All they could do was destroy it, but the damage was already done. Unbeknownst to all of them, the smallest seeds of corruption, they'd taken roots within the Emerald Dream. Yogg-Saron had used the trees planted by Fendrel as a gateway, through which the other old gods could also grasp the ethereal domain. In time, these seeds polluted the Dreamways, which marked the beginning of what would become known as the Emerald Nightmare.
The end of days is finally upon you, and all who inhabit this miserable little seedling.
Over the years, the influence of the nightmare would grow. What started with Yogg-Saron was then picked up by N'Zoth, who had made himself a new friend, Xavius the Tree. He had survived the destruction of the world, the pain of the sundering coursing through him. While part of him was in the physical world, rooted as a tree, another part was in the Emerald Dream, spreading the nightmare's influence as the Nightmare Lord. And we saw hints of this foul darkness already seeping through. Back at the Sunken Temple, you might recall fighting against several green dragons. More than 1,000 years ago, Ysera and her flight had showed up at the temple when the fanatic Atalite trolls, they tried to summon the Dark Loa Hakar into the world. To stop them, they turned their temple into the Sunken Temple, and Ysera left behind guards, amongst them her consort Irenicus, to make sure that it would never again be used for evil. That's when the effects of the nightmare started to kick in. Descendants of the Atalite trolls, they returned to the temple, and they found that its guardians were disoriented and vulnerable. Both the nightmare and the trolls then dragged the dragons down into the depths of madness and corruption. Now in firm control of the temple, the Atalai began their gruesome rituals to summon Hakar into the world again. The green dragon Itarius figured out what was happening at the temple. He summoned the aid of the Cenarian Circle. Heroes of the Alliance were asked to go in and cleanse the temple, grabbing themselves the chained essence of Irenicus. This trinket was kinda awesome, as it would produce a poison cloud around you. But even better, it would also torture the soul of Irenicus, who would beg you to stop this torment, bring him to his ally Itarius within the Swamp of Sorrows. You could choose to go through the questline to set his spirit free, or you can keep the trinket on you and keep the torture going. Either way, lore-wise, Irenicus would go on to play his part within the Scepter of the Shifting Sands questline. Heroes wanted to remove the walls surrounding Ankh-Kiraj to take care of the old god Kafun. For this, they were going to need several shards that were found amongst the different dragonflights. Irenicus was summoned, still under the control of the old gods. Were able to subdue him, to which Tyrande and the priestesses, they call upon the powers of Elune to redeem the cursed dragon, and they restore his mind. Sadly, the nightmare would still claim in the future, as Irenicus sacrificed himself to save his beloved queen. And of course, he wasn't the only corrupted green dragon that would walk on the surface. Driven mad, these world bosses, these so-called Dragons of Nightmare, they murdered innocents by the hundreds, indiscriminately targeting whatever living creatures were nearby. The Cenarian Circle's members were mournful but resolute. There was no alternative but to slay the victims of the nightmare. Yet the green dragon souls, they do enjoy a similar connection to the dream as we've seen with the wild gods. That's why a Lefon came back to be slain during the war against the nightmare within the novel Stormrage. Emeris was also killed in that same war, accidentally though, as Tyrande, she tried to cleanse his corruption, only to find that there was nothing left. Terrar would be killed by adventurers, who had the support of Ysandra, our last dragon of nightmare. She was actually able to set herself completely free of the nightmare, now living with a healthy fear of falling back into its clutches. Within Feralis, we teamed up to take care of Terrar, to which all she really wanted was a peaceful life amongst mortals for the rest of her days. Sadly, that wouldn't be her fate, as in Legion, all 4 of them would be fighting for the nightmare once again.
Oh, Ysandra, how cruel fate can be.
That's the reason why we spend a whole lot of time talking about the Emerald Dream and the Nightmare, because it has had some major effects on the stories of the Green Dragons. Now Xavius the Nightmare Lord, he had not forgotten or forgiven, he would only grow stronger over the years, moving his pawns in such a way that he could fulfill his old god's master's wishes, but also claim sweet revenge upon Malfurion Stormrage, corrupting the very home of the Night Elves and some of their most trusted members. Now, I've mentioned this War of the Shifting Sands a couple of times now, as some important dragons, they sacrifice themselves to contain the threats of the old god Cthulhu. For the Greens, that was Marifra, daughter of Ysera, that took up residence inside when the wall came up. But they weren't the only ones giving up their lives. The elves, led by Fendrel Stackhelm, they gave everything they had on the desert sands. The war, it was going strong with him leading the charge, something that the enemy knew all too well. That's why they set their sights on his son Valstan. They executed him, ripped him apart in front of his father's eyes, despite ultimately winning the war, setting up that whole Scarlet Wall. Fendrel was shattered, wanted nothing to do with any of them, in turn shattered the scepter of the Shifting Sands. This grief over the loss of his son, it would leave him vulnerable to Xavier's corruption. Through the images of his child, the Nightmare Lord whispered, corrupted, manipulated, until the World Tree Teldrassil was under his corruption, and his arch-enemy, Malfurion, kept within a coma, locked up within the dream, working until all the pieces were just right to unleash the full might of the nightmare upon Azeroth. This happened somewhat before the Cataclysm time periods. All across the world, people slumbered with horrific nightmares, unable to wake up. Even Ysera was captured, adding her powers to the nightmare. All seemed lost, was it not for the unity of Tyrande and Malfurion? They led the war against Xavius, led a freaking dream army against his dream form, while also assaulting the physical tree underworld. Teldrassil was fully cleansed. The relentless assaults pushed the effects of the nightmare back, all the way to the Rift of Aln, where Malfurion could push it back no further. A threat for another day, they decided. Going back home, and after millennia, finally deciding to get married, Ysera and Alexstrasza decided to bless their new home at Teldrassil, and also guided their wedding. And not only did Malfurion awaken from the dream, Ysera went from the dreamer to the awakened as well. But the transition from spending so long within the dream to now be in the waking world, it was quite difficult. During her dreams, she had seen visions, but it was incredibly difficult to tell what was truth and what was fantasy. What she could sense deep down was something related to the Outer Twilights, and that former war chief Thrall, he was going to play a critical role in what was to come. She pushed him on a quest, which started with an extremely simple task, one that he might have refused was it not asked by a dragon aspect herself. Unbeknownst to all was that journey, which started with the smallest of steps, it would lead to Thrall uniting and strengthening the other aspects. He would stand with them as a surrogate Earth Warder in the war against Deathwing and the Zoth.
Friends, we have gathered here today to heal this world that we've sacrificed so much to save. For the first time, the Earthen Ring and the Cenarian Circle will unite to restore this great tree, thereby healing the whole of Azeroth.
Time is precious, sister. Let us see to our ritual.
To strengthen their efforts and the world, they came together to perform a ritual which would heal and re-empower Nordrassil. The meeting got interrupted by Fendrel and the now Druids of the Flame. After the event with Xavius, they locked Fendrel away, but we accidentally helped the Green Dragon Alistra to set him free. In our defense, we had no idea that she had joined Team Ragnaros, would be transformed into Firehawk Alice Razor. Being Team Ragnaros also means being Team Deathwing, and knowing that Thrall could be a great threat to their plans, they split him up into different elements, scattering him across the elemental planes. While the aspects were quick to give up, his mate Agra did not, and she brought him back. Another wedding was held, and while we wouldn't see it in-game, they did finish the whole healing ritual. Then it was time to prepare for the battle against Deathwing himself. A brilliant plan in which they would grab the dragon soul from a different time period. They empowered it and stood united against the mad aspects. What none had dared to dream of actually came true. The corrupted Black Dragon aspect was defeated, and the old gods' plans of breaking out of their prisons, the Outer Twilights, that was stopped. At a great price, as the aspects sacrificed a huge chunk of their powers, and they now viewed the world through mortal eyes. Not to worry though, Ysera had spent years creating an army of mortals that could help her out with safeguarding nature and the Emerald Dream. They'd even created somewhat of an echo of that domain right here on Azeroth. Val'sharah, it's called. Yet during Legion, we'd soon enough find out that the corruption of the old gods was not entirely gone. What had started with Yogg-Saron all those years ago It was growing and spreading like a rot seeping out of the lands. They had known that the nightmare was only pushed back, and now it come back with a vengeance. Heroes venture through the zone, slowly but surely uncovering the corruption. Even the demigod Cenarius is claimed by it, something that pushes Malfurion over the edge. Seeing his mentor suffer and fall, it has him rush off right into the trap of Xavius. We join Ysera in trying to save him, exactly as Xavius had planned. The corrupted Tear of Elune is shot right into her dragon heart. Unable to control herself, she lashes out against the world that she had spent her whole life trying to defend. We had no other choice but to end her suffering, end the mortal aspect, send her off into the Shadowlands.
Do what you must, dear friend. It is the only way.
Back on Azeroth, we still had the Nightmare Lord to deal with. Into the corrupted tree Shaladrasil we went, slaying its guardian Nyfendra, the corruption of Il'gynoth, all the poor victims who'd been claimed by the Nightmare and now unwillingly had to fight against us. This is where we see Ysandra and those Dragons of Nightmare again. All were slain, just to get to the source of it all, Xavius at the Rift of Aln. The dream of Ysera fills our hearts and minds, giving us the chance to face the ultimate corruption. When all is said and done, the Nightmare Lord is finally slain, and the effects of the nightmare, they seem to have been fully dealt with. Except for one small little thing, Ysera guides us to it, in a cave where we find the remnant of the Void.
Almost completely gone, as if it never existed. But the rift is deep and vast, and somewhere down there it stirs. Something has changed. The last prison weakens. We must prepare.
Prepare to face off against the old god N'Zoth, liberated from its prison during Battle for Azeroth. With Ysera gone, the Green Dragonflight is not only greatly depowered, they're now also missing a leader, and it's her daughter Marifra of the Dream that tries to step up to the plate. But filling her mom's shoes, it doesn't come easy. Not to mention that despite not directly having to deal with the nightmare, that doesn't mean that the Void in general is gone. We see that while empowering our Heart of Azeroth, as we assist Marifra and the Greens with keeping their dreamways clean. Some familiar names show up here, like Lord Irparius, but also Valifria Dreamwalker, a green dragon that almost randomly showed up as an encounter during the Icecrown Citadel raid. Instead of fighting her as a boss, her encounter was more about holding off waves of ants while restoring her strength. She is the one that provided us with a pulsing life crystal, which in turn gave us a chance to recover as much of Sindragosa as we could when we brought our spirit back to Caligos within Dragonblight. Dragon lore, I'm telling you, it's all connected. Now after helping them regain control here, she calls upon the others to help her with empowering their dragon skill. No longer will the Greens hide in the dreams. Their feet are firmly on the ground. As their might, it gave us the chance to end N'Zoth, cleanse the world of Azeroth from its old god's infection.
Though we have suffered great losses, the Green Dragonflight remains steadfast in our duty to Azeroth. May this gift honor the memories of those who came before us.
And that's pretty much where the Green Dragonflight is at right now, with Marifra in charge and Ysera in the Shadowlands. We too will journey into the afterlife, chasing down Sylvanas and the threat of the jailer. Our journey took us to the other side, to Ardenweald, where we introduced ourselves to the Winter Queen and took care of a very special seed, the one that contains Ysera's spirits. Now the darkness that was assaulted the Shadowlands, it made it so that Ardenweald was weakened. From Tros, the Blighted Lands, which we now know is actually part of the Emerald Dream turned Emerald Nightmare. The Drusvar tried to claim the Winter Queen's domain. They soon realized how foolish it was to test their power against her. But still, they were going to need anima, and it wasn't enough to keep all of their groves and all of their seeds going. Already, they had made terrible sacrifices for the good of the grove, letting spirits go like the demigod Ursoc. What was one more seed to be sacrificed?
Why would I save her, pet?
Those who have dreamed by its side awaken with a joy and peace that whispers of wonder. If she dies, then all that is Emerald dies with her.
Some must be sacrificed, but some must be saved. If we forget that, all that will remain will be empty shells and sorrow.
were able to change her minds, and by using a portion of her own essence, the Winter Queen binds her sister's pet, Ysera, to her realm. The beautiful green aspect is a great ally, defends the domain, and helps Tyrande with her Night Warrior problem.
I know of a place it can be protected, but it has been so long. Bring the seed to my daughter. Marithra will know where it should be taken.
Are you not returning to Azeroth with us? Surely the Winter Queen will allow you to—
When the Queen used her own essence to revive me from the Wild Seed, it bound my soul to this realm. I cannot leave it, not without great sacrifice.
Then tell us the price, and it shall be paid.
No, my friends. The Kaldori need you beside them once more. If Elune wills it, I shall soar through Azeroth's skies again. One day.
If Elune wills it, she might fly the skies of Azeroth again. But for now, this is where she's going to remain, while her daughter Marithra leads their flight into the New Age, into the Dragon Isles.
We were sisters. The only two of our brood to survive. Inseparable ever since our birth. Some believed that as the smallest among us, she was also the weakest. They were wrong. Ysera was strong in a way most could not understand. But hers was a strength on which Azeroth depended.
I do not know if I possess such strength, or if I can fulfill the task that lies ahead of me.
Neither did she. None of the aspects did. But we rose to the challenge, as will you. Have faith in yourself, Marithra.
Thank you, Alexstrasza. I will do my best to live up to my mother's legacy.
It's time to cover the story of the last of the major Dragonflights. We're gonna be talking about the Bronze One with the leader Nosdormu.
Just in time.
Nosdormu, the Timeless One, was empowered by the Keepers and the Titans, after the, at the time, Proto-Dragons banded together to end the Threat of Galakrond. His blessing came from Aman'Thul, High Father and leader of the Pantheon. Unto you is charged the great task of keeping the purity of time. Know that there is only one true timeline, though there are those who would have it otherwise. You must protect it. Without the truth of time as it is meant to unfold, more will be lost than you could possibly imagine. The fabric of reality will unravel, and it is a heavy task, the base of all tasks of this world, for nothing can transpire without time. Power over time itself. The past, the future, the present. Enough power to make anyone lose their heads. But to make sure that they fully realize that not even the Bronze Dragon aspect is beyond the effects of time, they also showed him the moment of his demise. Something that seemingly is not just reserved for their aspects. I can't say for certain that all the Bronze Dragons know the moment of demise is like a package deal, part of having their powers. Or if it was more of a, I got curious, so I checked out my own timeline kind of deal. All I can say for certain is that the Bronze Dragon Chromie, they also checked out their death and knows exactly when they're supposed to die. That's why they recruited our aid when someone was trying to kill them before their supposed time. And compared to the domains of the other flights, Earth, life, nature, even magic, we got a solid understanding and concept of what's going on. But the domain of time, it's a bit more tricky. The fantasy concept, it has different rules and explanations across different media. You got multiple timelines, the butterfly effect, bootstrap paradoxes, or, wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. A lot of things that you can apply to the time travel, and ultimately, considering that we are dealing with a fantasy concept, anything pretty much goes.
Time is a tangled web. Try not to dwell on all the loose ends.
Taking it into Warcraft, we know that the sacred charge of the Bronze Dragonflight, it's to keep the timeline pure. One timeline, which has certain events that need to happen. Immediately, there's already a bit of a problem, as the timeline has been altered. There is a timeline in which the War of the Ancients played out, and the Night Elves, they knew nothing about the Orc Proxigar. Then we would see Bruxigar, together with Coriostras and Ronin, swept up, taken back in time, 10,000 years to the War of the Ancients. This time tornado sweeping them away, that was Nosdormu's desperate attempt to get some sort of help, as he had gotten himself trapped trying to investigate some unknown time anomaly. All he could do was hold the fabric of the timeways together and just hope that Bruxigar and crew could see the war through. And they did, but not without playing an active role within the war. They would change moments that without them being there would have never existed, like a Ronin that guided Illidan through the ways of magic, or Kresus saving a couple of the Blue Dragon eggs, saving Malfurion's life. There are, at the very least, two versions as to how the War of the Ancients played out, and yet Nosdormu, he's perfectly fine with that. How does that fit into keeping the timeline pure? And I guess that an explanation could be that the details don't really matter as long as these major key point events still play out as they should. Despite some changes that they made, some knowledge that was revealed before its time, Deathwing was still defeated, the Dragon Soul locked away, the Legions invasion was still prevented, and Azeroth still split apart. After which, Nosdormu would become obsessed with unraveling the mystery as to what or who had been responsible for the anomaly and more. After sending our heroes back home, he disappeared into the timeways and would not be seen again for many years.
This was not our destiny. Times change.
The concepts of alternate realities and alternate timelines, they exist as well, but they don't exist forever. I'm gonna lean heavy here on the Chronicles to explain how exactly that works. In all known realms of the cosmos, time flows forwards, ever forwards. Chaotic energies in places like the Twisting Nether, they can affect how quickly it flows, but it only flows forwards. Once an event happens, it cannot be changed. These events and choices, made up of all creatures and forces in the cosmos, they join together like a river, sharing the same reality. Different choices and different possibilities naturally spin off the river of time like small creeks and estuaries, ebbing and flowing for a while. If these shades of what could have been are left alone, they will eventually dissipate into nothing. But if efforts are made to preserve them or alter them, they can indeed remain in existence indefinitely. They can even be made to feed back into the main river. Dead creatures can seemingly live again, and the past or future may literally come back to haunt you. Rough translation: alternate realities, staying or disappearing. It kinda depends on what they need for the story, and if someone goes through the trouble of preserving them. Having Nosdormu investigate the source behind the anomaly, trying to figure out what was going on, it had him get stuck in time again. He would be saved by former Warchief Thrall on a quest given to him by Ysera. The rescue mission had Thrall go through these different time periods, even some timelines that would never be, like the one in which he died as a baby, and so he never rose up to form the Hordes. Realities like that would eventually disappear, whereas the alternate reality which we visited during Wars of Draenor, that one has been greatly altered, even reconnected to our timeline to recruit the Mega Orcs into the Hordes. That timeline seems to be a permanent one. With our first trip, it had us go not just into an alternate reality, we also traveled back in time around the formation of the first Hordes. And then the second trip that had the timelines line up. 35 years, give or take, they passed, which has not been the greatest time for this reality. Yrl and the Draenei, they've started a holy crusade against the Orcs, which is a storyline hopefully one day will be further explored.
Draenor has fallen, but we will make a new home on Azeroth. Your enemies are now our enemies.
After Thrall saved Nosdormu, the Bronze Aspect revealed what he had learned by deep diving into the timeways. That pretty much all the horrible events against the Dragonflight and Azeroth, they've been orchestrated by the Old Gods. Even worse, he will become corrupted and form the Infinite Dragonflight, again by the hands of the Old Gods. Those revelations were soon enough revealed to actually be true. Once Thrall had helped out the Aspects, took up the role as surrogate aspect of Earth in the war against Deathwing during the Cataclysm, we came up with a crazy idea to stop Deathwing once and for all. We were going to steal his creation, the Dragon Soul, out of the timeline, bring it back to ours, then empower it further with the might of the aspects, and turn it against its creator. Only problem is that someone has locked up the timeways and made it so that no time travel was possible, except to one specific spot, the so-called end time, one of an infinite number of potential outcomes, in which we actually failed to stop the Hour of Twilight, and Deathwing actually won, completing the old gods' plans and putting them back as rulers upon Azeroth. As a reward, they impaled the mighty Black Behemoth upon Wormrest Temple. Not the best timeline to find yourself in, but what entity could possibly have the power to prevent Nosdormu from cruising the timeways? Well, that would be Nosdormu himself, in the form of Moruzand. Nosdormu was tricked by the old gods into trying to subvert his mortality. That one thing that he was absolutely not allowed to do. As a result, Nosdormu shattered the timeways, created the infinite Dragonflight, jeopardizing the very future of Azeroth.
You crawl unwitting like a blind, writhing worm towards endless madness and despair. I have witnessed the true end time. This is a blessing you simply cannot comprehend.
Has Moruzand really seen a timeline worse than the one in which the old gods won? Or is this more old god trickery? Uncertain, but the fate of Nosdormu is set in stone. By his own admission, this is his moment of demise.
You know not what you have done, Amenthul. What I... At last it has come to pass. The moment of my demise. The loop is closed. My future self will cause no more harm. Still, in time, I will fall to madness. And you, heroes, will vanquish me. The cycle will repeat.
Which is quite the interesting moment. He wasn't allowed to prevent his death, but doing exactly that is what creates Moruzand. It creates the moment of his death. Him becoming Moruzand closes the loop. So while it might be old god trickery that pushes him over the edge, there might be some form of corruption. It could also very well be an active choice to keep the timeline pure. Interesting loop going on here, and time is going to tell. Let's not forget that this is lore that is set up back in the Cataclysm. Things are subject to change. Either way, Moruzand is slain. The timeways are opened up again. We retrieve the Dragon Soul at the end of the War of the Ancients.
It is time! I will expend everything to bind every thread. Here, now, around the Dragon Soul. What comes to pass will never be undone!
Taking it back to our time period. We use it to defeat Deathwing, to which the dragon aspects they give up a huge chunk of their powers, and must now see the world through mortal eyes. With his powers gone, the Dragon Soul has returned to its place in time. Yet it still left the domain of time to be guarded, and similar to how Ysera has worked together with the Druids, the Bronze Dragons would ally themselves with mortals of the world. Not the first time that they've looked favorable upon mortals. Once they came into contact with Zarantar, the Witness, a Tauren druid, one of the first Tauren druids, taught by Shando Cenarius himself, before the Legion, before the Sundering, which means over 10,000 years ago. He wandered his natural life in search of knowledge, seeking more wonder and meeting more strange and mysterious races than any of his people before him, traveling across the length and breadth of ancient Kalimdor until there was no more to see. No new lands across the horizon. Yet, there was still so much that he did not know, as he felt his final journey approaching, and he wept for the things he would never know. That's when they found him, the Bronze Dragonflight, snatching him from the brink of death. Their master Nosdormu wanted him to continue his hunt, and they gave him, just as they'd given to the Night Elves through their blessing of Nordrassil, they gave him immortality as a watcher, tasked to bear to witness the history of Azeroth. Then, the mortals on the Timeless Isle, we would find the faction of Time Walkers. You got yourself the Historians, the Watchers, the Weavers, and the Wardens. All of them working together with the Keepers of Time. Even mortals outside of their faction were invited to help out, help investigate this mysterious Timeless Isle. And as they do, they also gather power for the Bronze Dragon Kairos Dormu. Kairos has invented a special device called the Vision of Time, which he asked us to charge up. As we do, he's able to show us some interesting visions. Some of them are part of the past, some of them are part of the future, and some are futures that might be if we fail. One vision doesn't seem to be connected though, the death of Storidormi, Nosdormu's mates, which hasn't played out in any way, shape or form. Instead, Kairos would thank us for our efforts and use his Vision of Time during the trial of Garrosh Hellscream. Show visions of the past for all present to support the court proceedings, while his true goal it was to get Garrosh out of there. Use the Vision of Time to send them over to alternate Draenor. The motivation behind this, the motivation of Kairos and Rephion working together. As far as I know, that's only truly been explained during the Legion beta. This dialogue that they later removed, but it does make sense. They wanted Hellscream to meet up with his father, form a new horde, to then have that horde add its numbers to Azeroth's defenders, have them stand with us against the Burning Legion. Instead, Garrosh shoved a shard of the Vision of Time through Kairos' throat and went about to do his own thing. He formed the Iron Horde not in the defense of Azeroth, but rather to conquer it. We'd come across the spirits, the echo of Kairos, and a lot of what he was saying, it was all hinting at the birth of the infinite Dragonflight.
Kairos, what did you want? Why did you need an army?
Not just one. An infinite number of armies, across an infinite number of worlds. I would be infinite!
The Infinite Dragons had even shown up to attack the trial, create enough turmoil for Kairos and Garrosh to make a clean escape. So there was definitely some sort of connection between them. Sadly, this was a story that they never continued, and while we have some idea about who their leader Moruzant is, why they created the Infinite Flight, we don't know exactly what they want to accomplish. They've shown up to mess around with critical moments on the timeline. They've tried to stop Medivh from opening up the Dark Portal. They tried to stop Thrall from escaping Durnhold. They tried to stop Arthas from going to Northrend. Somewhere along the way, one of them also decided to become a pirate. But what does it mean? Why did they want to alter these moments? What is the motive behind it? That is still a subject to be explored. One theory, that would be to try and serve their old gods' masters. By stopping the Horde from coming to Azeroth or being formed. The war in Silithus against C'Thun, that would have looked entirely different. Same could be said for Yogg-Saron and Northrend. If the Lich King had been there to draw attention to the place, then Yogg-Saron's actions within Ulduar, they might have gone unnoticed as well. Just a theory though. We might very well be looking for patterns that no longer exist. Yet I would be very surprised if Dragonflight isn't going to massively deal with the whole Infinite Dragonflight storyline. And honestly, I can't wait to learn more.
My story is already written, but yours, and that of all Drakthir, is only beginning to unfold.
That, so far, is the major idea behind the Bronze Dragons and their powers over time. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the more known members and what they've meant for the story.
Is it time already?
Storidormi, as I mentioned earlier, also spelled as Saridormi. That is the prime consort of Nosdormu, and she often represents the Master of Time whenever he's occupied elsewhere. A good example, that was him being stuck in that time anomaly, while they still needed to empower the Dragon Soul. For moments like this, they had an hourglass, made up what appeared to be of pure golden sunlight. Within it, glittering bronze sands flowed not down but up. And when the top failed, they then descended, only to begin their upward march once more. These sands were part of Nosdormu, set separate by him for urgent need by his flight. In Nosdormu's name, they added his strength to the disc. You kinda gotta wonder how a walking spoiler like Nosdormu, how he looks upon these events.
Before you is the cache of the aspects. Take from it what you will, for you have more than earned the right.
Although you may want to hurry.
He has the power over time, after all. He knows things before they're going to happen. And yet, for the sake of the timeline, he has to let them happen anyways. That has to be a great burden. Yet at the same time, they also make use of, clouding his vision or weakening his powers. Being able to prophesy something, it doesn't always mean that you're right in the story of Warcraft. We could look at the visions that were given to Velen about young Anduin, or Queen Alyssant, leader of the Nightborn, who saw no other future for their people except one ally to the Legion. We proved them wrong on that account. And sometimes Nosdormu can't be sure about what's to come. Or he simply has to keep his mouth shut and just let it happen.
Time holds many visions. Some will prove true. Others should be taken with a grain of Sand.
From the union of Nosdormu and assumed to be Soridormi, there came a child known as Anachronos, heir of Nosdormu. Throughout the history of the Dragonflight, you've heard about heroic dragons flying into Ankiraj to hold the line, give Azeroth a chance to lock the threat of Kafun. It was the Bronze who was asked by the elves to help first, and they had refused. What were these mortal quarrels to the might of the dragons? That mindset quickly changed though, when Kafun's forces dared to strike at the Caverns of Time. Now the elves had the support of the dragons on their side. Together, they managed to set up the Scarab Wall with a gong in place. If there was ever need for mortals to get past the wall, all they had to do was strike the gong with the Scepter of the Shifting Sands. But Steghelm, after losing his son in the war, he wanted nothing to do with any of it. He shattered the scepter, only for heroes to reforge it during Classic and venture into Ankiraj once more.
Listen well, mortal. Countless threads are woven to create the fabric of our timeline. As the Wardens of Time, we of the Bronze Dragonflight observe their infinite combinations. When disruptions are detected by our Watchers, we are charged with their repair. A recent event, obscured by powerful magics, remains masked even to me. But the catastrophic outcome is plain. Azeroth will burn. While the details remain shrouded from our view, one thing we have gleaned is that the fate of Azeroth hinges on the deeds of a mortal. Are you the mortal on which so much depends? Only time will tell.
Anachronos would aid mortals again for the sake of time and Azeroth. It was them who sent us on a mission to uncover that treachery within the Blue Dragonflight and ultimately forge Terragosa's rest, as well as help Eitrigg and the Horde recruit the Magar orcs into their ranks, helping out the mortals of the world. And there is another bronze that loves to hang out with us. Chromie or Chronormu. They're probably the most well-known bronze dragon out there, and their naming scheme has been a topic of discussion for quite a few years. You might have already picked up on how the different flights have different naming schemes for their males and their females. In the case of the bronze, we've got Ormu, which is the ending for males, like Nosdormu, while Urmi is the ending for the females, like Soridormi. Yet Chromie, they use a female visage, which they go into much more detail with in the story Visage Day as part of Folks and Fairy Tales of Azeroth, but now they also publish it for free on the WoW website. In it, we read about Chromie's journey in choosing their visage, talking with other dragons, find out their motivations for how they appear. For example, an Onyxia chose her female human visage as humans, while not the strongest nor the smartest, they are the most relentless. Heed my wisdom, little one. You are a dragon, a hunter, with claws for tearing and teeth for killing. No visage will change that. And just like your other gifts, your visage will be a means to take what you want. That's not how Chronormu wanted to be seen by mortals, though. On the other hand, there was a Kalagos, who had chosen his visage as he wanted to come across as a friend, a peer, and someone they could trust. Ultimately, our Chromie decided on the form of a female gnome, because they felt that that visage suited them best. And as our gnome buddy, she has popped up in our timeline a fair few times, often quite confused if they're early or if they're late, dealing with the threats to time at Enderhall, joining us on our adventures through time in the Caverns of Time. Even finding time to support the mortal efforts during the trial of Garrosh, and journey with them to alternate Draenor to make up for the damage caused by Kairos. As I mentioned earlier, someone has tried to kill our Chromie before they're supposed to die. We still don't have a clear answer as to who or what wanted to kill her. Perhaps, like the story of the Infinites, something that we could explore further within Dragonflight.
I have a sneaking suspicion that the enemy is planning a cross-synchronous attack. Why else would they be using chrono shards, right? I can tell you're a little foggy on what that means. Basically, they're attacking me at multiple points in time simultaneously. These guys really know what they're doing. I wouldn't be surprised if they had a bronze dragon on their side.
Exciting stuff on the horizon. But for now, I think you're up to speed on the major story behind the Bronze Dragonflight and their effects upon the world. Can't wait to see what the future's going to bring.
The world is healing.
It is the year 40 in Azeroth as we begin our adventures to the Dragon Isles. Year 35 was when we went into the Shadowlands. We partied there for 2 years and then we had a time skip. For the first time, we've had a massive skip. In this case, 3 years, in which Azeroth basically stood still. There's been no major wars, no major events besides a wedding or two, giving some of the characters the chance to age a little bit, like Moira's child Dagran. The ending of Shadowlands saw the jailer attack Azeroth's soul directly and still lose the battle, giving us a dire warning. A universe divided would never be ready for what is to come. Who knows what he was talking about? Nobody seems to care or remember, as there's been no mention of it during the expansion. That rift that was opened by Sylvanas also automatically closed itself with the jailer's defeat. The world is healing, Alexstrasza tells us, but why now, what exactly changed, or what the details are of the world healing is not gone further into. What is important is that with the world healing, the Dragon Isles awaken and call the dragons home. The Isles have been hidden for over 10,000 years, but we gotta go further back for the start of that story. In the time where our aspects have united with Keeper Tyr and brought the corrupted primal dragon Galagrond low. They agreed to keep aiding Tyr and the Keepers with safeguarding Azeroth, and so they and many of their kind were transformed from primal dragons, or proto-dragons as we used to call them, into the different dragonflights, black, blue, red, green and the bronze. But not everyone was keen on following the will of the Titans. A resistance rose up, led by the primal incarnates. Primal dragons that have gone through a deadly, unexplained ritual which greatly increased their elemental power. Virak, Iridikron, Razageth and Virnov. They would lead the opposing forces against the orderly way of the aspects, especially once they discovered that, in order to increase the dragon unit's numbers, Primal X had been stolen from the wilds and converted into dragons, converted to follow the will of the domain of order. The so-called War of the Scaleborn played out. The Black Dragon Neltharion had always expected that war and conflict would come to them, so he prepared some special equipment, plans, strategies, and most of all the Dragfear, brutal dragon killers, embodying the might of all the flights into one, firmly under his control with the use of Oathbinder. They were so loyal to him though that he most likely didn't need to use the gauntlets, but Neltharion was not the trusting sort. Not surprising, when you got the whispers of the old gods in your mind, convincing you that you're worthless, that you're going to fail, that you can't trust anyone. They had him crawl like a whelpling in his lair, but none knew of his struggles. None knew of his secret war, and that would be the start of his downfall. Razageth attacked when she discovered Neltharion's secret troops and aimed at his gauntlets. With control lost, the tide of battle quickly turned. He gave in to those whispers, the powers of the void, and locked Razageth away. That still left his Dragfear though. There would be ways to just discard them, but he also couldn't keep them around like this. They knew far too much and were no longer fully under his control. Deciding to trust his close friend Malygos, the blue dragon aspect, the Dragfear were locked away as well, within magical stasis. The War of the Scaleborn would still be won by the dragon aspects. The remaining primal incarnates were locked away in a specially crafted vault, the Vault of the Incarnates. Iridikron was such a schemer and powerhouse though that Neltharion, in order to overpower him, had once again dipped into the powers of the voids. All the same, victory was earned, dragons ruled supreme, and time passed on. Then the next major event, that would be the War of the Ancients, over 10,000 years ago. The Burning Legion trying to claim Azeroth, with Neltharion giving into the void, showing all the madness of Deathwing. He managed to convince his fellow aspects to give up a portion of their power into the Dragon Soul, or more accurately named the Demon Soul, as Neltharion never made a sacrifice. And while the disc proved super effective against the invading Legion, the Mad Aspects also turned it on the Defenders, and even his fellow aspects. The war was still won, but not without a price. The Blue Dragonflight was nearly wiped out. The Black Dragonflight would be hunted to near extinction. The land itself sundered apart, and the Dragon Isles were hidden away.
The world has been sundered. It cries out in pain. We must go to its aid. We entrust our ancestral home to you. The
Watchers. Let the land slumber, hidden even from our own eyes. You will feel our return in the waking of the land. Then, you must light the beacon of Tyrhold, lest the path home be lost to us forever.
Their broodlands, their home, hidden away even from their own eyes. And the healing of the lands was gonna take a little bit longer than expected. Some in that time span were put asleep on the Isles, like the Keepers and the Jardin, whereas others, like the Centaur and the Tusker, they just lived their lives as normal. Even the draconic caretakers, they kept up with their duties, hoping for the day that the aspects would return. Meanwhile, on the outside, life's been pretty rough for the dragons. The Blue Dragonflight had to deal with Malygos going insane after the War of the Ancients, regaining said sanity to then start the Nexus War and be taken out. Kalecgos has taken over from him as aspect. The Green Dragonflight had to deal with Ysera getting corrupted by the Emerald Nightmare and then taken out. Her daughter Marifra has taken over, while Ysera's spirit has been bound to Ardenweald, one of the domains of death. Then the Red Dragonflight had to deal with Queen Alexstrasza getting enslaved, and many of the consorts of the Lightbinder had passed away. The Bronze Dragonflight knows the moment of demise, and their leader Nosdormu always fears the day that he will become his infinite counterpart. He will become Moruzand. And then the Black Dragonflight. They had to deal with Deathwing's madness and the near extinction of their flights. Victory against it did not come without great sacrifice. The Aspects got their powers back from the disc, only to use it at the end of the Cataclysm to defeat Deathwing once and for all. Not all is lost though. Hope is still on the horizon. Raytheon has risen up, spent years studying the corruption of the old gods, knowledge that allowed him to protect his brother Ebonhorn and defeat the old god N'Zoth. And then there's also Sibelian, a black dragon that's been stuck in Outlands for quite a few years. As I said, time has not been kind to the dragons. In fact, they've barely managed to stay together. But now, in the current time period, all can hear that call to come home. The world is healing, the Isles awaken, and so too do the elements. Somehow, the Primalists, the faction that stood with the Primal Incarnates during the War of the Scaleborn, they're still around, and they're now being called to the Forbidden Reach by Razageth to set her free. At the same time, the Dragfair are also released from their magical slumber, and while they try to stop the Primalists, Razageth is still released. Worries for later. And some of the Dragfair decide to join the Alliance. Some of them join the Horde. Some decide to travel themselves to see where they can help out. And then there's the Sundered Flame. Those that would never again follow the will of the Aspects. They had done nothing but be loyal, and all they got for their efforts was a long nap underneath the earth. They will have the part to play later. First, it's time to explore the Dragon Isles, make some friends, take out some enemies, with the main goal of dealing with the problems of the different Dragonflights to hopefully re-empower the Aspects and get them back at full power. The War of the Scaleborn was barely won in the past, and that's when they were at full power, and little did they know that Neltharion had to cheat and use his void powers. If we hope to stand a chance against Razageth, the Aspects must return. And so, the Waking Shores had us deal with the groundwork of the Red and the Black Dragonflights. Alexstrasza and the Reds saw Razageth on the attack, putting their life pools in danger, so we stopped them, while the Black Dragonflights fought against the Jardin to reclaim their Obsidian Citadel. Raytheon envisioned himself as taking over as aspect of their flight, but little did he know that Sibelian also felt the call of the Isles, returned with a bunch of other black dragons, X included, and he also envisioned himself as leader of their flight. While their base was secured, the decision on who was going to get that title was going to be sorted later. The Onaran Plains holds the story for the Green Dragonflight, who used to have an allegiance with the Centaur of the region. One of the Centaur tribes is in league with the Primalists and fights against the rest of their kind, while setting their sights on gaining entry into the Emerald Dream. We help secure the land and reaffirm the allegiance of Centaur and dragons. The Azure Span holds the story of the Blue Dragonflight, with a minor side story of gnolls diving into the powers of decay, but that story didn't really go anywhere, so maybe something for the future. The primary focus is on Kalecgos and his family. He had ordered his family, the Blue Dragonflight, to find their own destiny in the world after the events of the Cataclysm, and while the Wormrest Accords, the Aspects and their flights still held somewhat of an allegiance with each other, it wasn't exactly strong, despite Calic's best efforts at keeping them together. In the Azure Span, he finds a simulacrum of Sindragosa, former mate of Malygos, who you might recall fighting in Icecrown Citadel. That was her deceased undead resurrected form. This is like a cookie, a memory stored in their archives before the War of the Ancients. From her, he learns more about what it means to be aspect of their flight. While a Tusker, they teach him about what it means to be a family, because of course, that's what it's all about. Taking on Razagev will require more aid of the flight, but only those of the Broken Isles have answered his call for now. It is a start. Razagev is pushed away, but more work will be required. Then the final zone, Tel Dresses, is where we keep the capital of Veldraken. But not everybody is pleased with the Aspects coming back and just taking over. 10,000 years have passed after all. 10,000 years in which they took care of the land. They called it home. Who are these dragons to just walk in and take what is theirs? A conflict that plays out a little bit in the shadows, has a small rebellion rise up against the returning Aspects, but ultimately is quashed by the Queen in a questline where it hadn't even occurred to the Queen that the rebels didn't think that they needed the dragons. Now outside of the capital, we deal with the Bronze Dragonflight and Nosdormu's inevitable fate. The Infinite Dragonflight thinks that the time has come to push him onto this path, but we do whatever we need to do to stop this, and while successful in the moment, Nosdormu knows what is to come. Chromie is not going to give up though. A story for later, as for now, once we're done in the leveling zones, we focus on Razagev again, who's found the location of the Vault of the Incarnates. While Alexstrasza had hoped that by dealing with the issues of the flights, reactivating the O-Stones, we could restore the Aspect's power. Turns out, it wasn't going to be quite that easy yet. Still, Razagev will have to be stopped, so mortals provide their assistance, enter the vault and end Razagev's life. Not before she completes her quest of liberating the other incarnates. Now we got 3 of them to deal with: Virak, Veronov and Iridikron. Setting their sights on the Forbidden Reach, the place where Razagev was released and the Dragfear woke up. With Razagev gone, the storm she placed on the area disappears as well, and the Incarnates fly in to collect the coordinates to Neltharion's hidden laboratory. We also learn more on the Dragfear's history, and we see Skill Commander Emberfall make the clear choice of not holding on to their legacy or their past. They do not have to be what Neltharion envisioned them to be, nor do they have to give themselves over to revenge. She's gonna carve out a new path for the people with Ebonhorn's support, while Sarkarev and the Sundered Flame, they do the opposites, believing they have a claim to Neltharion's legacy. So when the Incarnates open the way down below, they quickly followed Virak, who is set on the task of getting more power, getting his claws on Shadow Flame, flames infused with the powers of Shadow. Meanwhile, Veronov and Iridikron, they went off towards other plans, so we traveled downwards to stop Virak and expose Neltharion's dark history. Now, despite spending many years researching the old gods, ways to fight them, ways to counter their corruption, and despite knowing the clear history of his father, Rephion is still taken by surprise by the whispers of the void. He is also incredibly ambitious when it comes to claiming the title of New Aspect of Earth, same as Abelian, both for different reasons and with different motivations. Meanwhile, Ebonhorn wants none of that, keeps a cool head and grows close to the Emberfall, who was trying to deal with the Sundered Flame, trying to make them see that times had changed and their place in the world was not set in stone. Some listened, but their leader Sarkarev went all the way, giving himself completely to that legacy, showing Rephion as Abelian what kind of fools they've been, showing them that Ebonhorn was in fact the right choice, that he should become the new Aspect, whereas the remaining Sundered Flame Dragfear rejoined Skill Commander Emberfall. In the same time, the Blues also dealt with their problems in honestly one of the best quest lines they've ever done, which remembers the past, deals with the present, and builds up to the future. With the Isles open to them again, they want to put the spirits of Malygos and Sindragosa to rest. But turns out that peace is not so easily afforded to these tortured spirits. Now, after clearing up the schedules of the other Blues that have not yet answered the Aspect's call, we truly put Malygos and Sindragosa to rest, as well as say farewell to one of the oldest dragons out there, not lost in war or in battle, but simply passing on to the old age. Xenagos is given his final farewell, while the Blue Dragonflight's family is closer than ever. Oh yeah, and Virak, he got a power upgrade by consuming that Shadow Flame, killed a bunch of Niffen, and rallied the slumbering Jarden elders to his side. He would spend a bit of time upstairs pretending that he was Deathwing, burning down territories, and causing a whole bunch of devastation. Next, we turn our attention to the Bronze Dragonflight, the disc with the coordinates to Abydos, the Dark Heart it's called. It can also be used to suck out and store the essence of Galakrond, which Iridikron, who is in league with Zolotov and the Infinite Dragonflight, really wants to do. The Infinites, in turn, really want Nosdormu to become the leader Murozond, and so they work together on getting this done. Chromie took on a corrupted counterpart Morchi in a desperate attempt at stopping both Iridikron and Murozond. Unfortunately, both options at the same time was not going to be available. Stopping one meant a success for the other, leaving her with no choice but to let Iridikron go.
Tell me, little one, have you ever questioned why the Titans preserve this timeline?
Go off into the next expansion. But at least Nosdormu has been saved, is even able to see things more from the Infinite's point of view, allowing them to grow a bit closer, work together on one of our side quests. You see, Keeper Tyr, the same keeper who had recruited the Dragon Aspects, told them to force order upon unborn children. He's left behind protocols to bring himself back. We get him a body, we reforge the Tyr's Guard, we cruise the timelines to get his memories back. All of that did bring the Keeper back, but not much else beyond that in the story. There's no reckoning for starting the War of the Skillborn, nor any questions about his experiments on primal dragons or his involvement with the corruption of Galakrond. He's just kind of been sitting there, gazing upon this new world. Now beyond here, there have been a couple of other side quests, like learning more about the Tusker, or one that's more intricate, one that deals with the World Tree Saga. This is heavily intertwined in the Night Elf Green Dragonflight story. In a nutshell, the Night Elves form a world tree. It was burned to the ground. Tronde traveled into the Shadowlands to claim vengeance, but went for renewal instead. A seed was given, infused with the souls of the burned Night Elves. A seed that was then planted within the Emerald Dream. Marifra has been the aspect of the Green Dragonfly for a while now, and yet Ysera is still taken out of the Shadowlands and brought back to Azeroth to reassure and guide her daughter in that role of aspects. To make this happen, Malfurion had to take Ysera's place within the Shadowlands. And now, with Virak's empowerment, the Emerald Dream and the new World Tree of Mirdasil are under threat once again. Allied to the Druids of the Flame, Virak has easy access into the Dream. But with Iridikron gone and the Shadow Flame pushing Virak to greater extremes, Verna thinks that this is not the way. Decides to join our side. Over 20,000 years of war is smoothed over off-screen, while Rephion invites her to join him on a diplomatic mission, bringing the Nether Dragons of Outland and the Storm Dragons of Stormheim into the fold. Azeroth unites to guard the Dream and the future of the Night Elves. Virak is defeated. No trees are burned this day, and as a bonus, the aspects are re-empowered. A little unexpected gift from Azeroth.
Our spectral powers have returned?
This is not the Titan's magic.
This is of our world, yet unlike anything I have known. Amir Drasil has left the Dream, and while the aspects once gave their blessing to the world trees, this time
Azeroth blessed us. I felt her presence. It was beautiful.
Ah, now I understand. I thought to survive, we needed to reclaim our aspectral powers. But they were never ours to take.
It was about coming together as a family.
And so we did.
Perhaps as we were always meant to.
All of us. When the Titans granted us power, it divided dragonkind.
But in uniting for a cause greater than ourselves, Azeroth's gift has made us, at last, truly whole.
We will use these lessons, old and new, to protect our world as her aspects.
The new World Tree of Mirdasil has crossed over from the Dream into the physical world. Ysera returns to the Shadowlands, and so Malfurion gets to come back, passing on a torch of leadership to their daughter Chandris. Ken Greymane does the same after retaking Gilneas, giving his daughter Tess the keys to the kingdom. The ending of Dragonflight sees the dragons united stronger than they have in millennia. All the flights have aspects again. Aspects not just in title, but empowered as well. Even Viranov is now an aspect, ready for whatever is to come in the future of Azeroth. A future which has Iridikron still out there, working together with Zalatov into the World Soul Saga. He says that the Titans have infected our world, and he will see them extinguished. Time is going to tell what that story is going to be, which we'll of course cover on the channel. But for now, thank you very much for watching, everyone. Subscribe if you like my videos, ring the bell to be notified of future uploads. And until next time, see ya!